The story kicked off with Alan, swinging his holy sword at the monsters in front of him and unleashing his deadliest attack. But every time he unleashed it, mana drained out of him like a flood. To crack it, Ishua keeps flipping Alan's manga back open again and again because that's his whole job as a monoporter. He raised the issue and not only backed Alan, but also rallied the rest of the hero's party, a magic swordsman, a saint, and a sage, thanks to it. Thanks to Ishua constantly refilling their mana, they could unleash their deadliest moves over and over, no drawbacks, no crazy mana drain slowing them down. It could even fix the magic sword mid-battle if things got rough. And on top of that, he poured in serious help on the healing side by loading the saint with enough holy magic to keep her healing spells flying. Ishua was so sure they'd win if every single member of the party still had their full mana tank ready. He was basically the party's solid rock, always standing strong, and because of him, they smashed through every quest they picked. But after just a few days, Alan suddenly snapped and kicked Ishua out of the party like it came out of nowhere. Ishua's world flipped upside down when the layoff hit out of nowhere. He tried to make Alan see it kick out Ishua, and the party's mana would drain fast, leaving them starving for power. Alan never bothered to check it, and he was sure the party was swimming in mana from the start. Ishua tried to explain that they hadn't noticed since he never made it obvious, but Alan didn't buy a word of it, insisting a simple monoporter couldn't possibly wield power like that. Alan hated Ishua because the guy couldn't stand seeing all those party girls fawn over Ishua, like he was some useless hero. Alan then looked him dead in the eye and swore it was a decision the whole party made together. They don't need Ishua anymore, and that crushed him, because he can't even wrap his head around it. They straight up told him to get out, so Ishua turned and walked away. Still reeling, I couldn't shake the gut punch of getting kicked out of nowhere. He remembered how a mana porter is one of those party jobs that thrives on pure mana hunger. Its whole purpose is to keep the team stocked with enough mana to survive the fight. And because they're stuck in the background most of the time, people love to underestimate them, just like Alan never once respected Ishua. Even so, Ishua couldn't shake his worry about the party because their lineup was stacked with a hero, a saint, a sage, and a magic swordsman, and every single one of them chewed through mana. Ishua worried they'd never manage to fight cleanly, saving their mana at the same time during those battles. But if everyone really voted to kick him out, then there's nothing we can do about it. Right then, one of the party members, Arya, shouted his attention and labeled him Senpai. He had no clue she'd come charging at him like that, so out of control, and the next thing he knew, she slammed into him at full speed with her chest. Miss it, or you'll lose that sweet scent of a woman forever. So after that, he leaned in and demanded to know why Arya was here yet. But she demanded to know why he ditched them out of nowhere. So suddenly, ever since the academy days, Saint Arya had one habit. She always called Ishua Senpai, because back then he was the one above her. Ishua snapped at her, "Why do you think I left when it was everyone else who ordered my expulsion?" Then Arya fought back, staring him down like, "How could you even say that, when they all depended on you for mana?" Ishua told her it was exactly what Alan had told him. Hearing that, you could tell Arya was furious even as a saint. She started leaking a dark aura like it was boiling over. She fumed at that bratty hero stirring up trouble for her senpai, but when Ishua saw Arya finally get it, relief hit him because he didn't want to leave at all. Arya admitted she didn't come all this way for fun. She came to snatch her senpai back, but now she's decided to stop there and just follow him from this point on. Ishua's whole world froze when he heard it because he knows it's always been her dream to join the hero's party. Yet Arya refused to step in when the hero who banished Ishua senpai was the one leading it. She knows he's been helping her since they were students, and it's all because of him that she became who she is today. So she grabbed Ishua's attention and begged him to take her with him. Ishua could feel her plea coming from the heart, no fake motives, just real intentions. So he nodded and let her tag along with him. Then curiosity hit him hard. How did she find him so fast? Arya fumbled out the truth, saying it was pure luck. She just happened to have senpai's hair. And that was the key for her search magic. Ishua still didn't buy it. If she really was a saint, why did her good act look exactly like what witches do when they're using black magic? Magic was in the air, and they kept trudging along until she turned to Ishua and demanded, "So what are we doing next?" He started thinking about a nearby town to get ready for their trip, when, out of nowhere, they stumbled on a group of people screaming for help. A savage pack of wolf monsters slammed into a carriage like it was prey. Ishu stepped up and promised to help them, and Arya just knew he'd say it, loud and clear. They burst straight into the middle, and Anya told Arya to handle the monsters while he poured mana into her. These wolf demons were B-rank monsters, exactly the kind that can wreck beginners fast. But Ishua stayed cool as ice, fully aware that won't stand a chance against a saint like Arya. Arya was totally losing control of her attack like she was about to drop a top-tier spell just to wipe out those wolves. She stacked multiple enchantments onto her strike, so her power stayed locked on just the right level. She flicked through her magic circles in seconds, then fine-tuned the flow of her magic so her attack hit hard without wrecking the entire area. Once Arya finished the counter to her overpower move, she blasted the innocent shine straight into the whole area around them. Others, and even the monsters, stared at the beam of light like it had answers they couldn't understand. It exploded apart and blasted outward, flooding the whole area around them in a chaotic shockwave. Even those undead monstrosities, still hundreds of meters off, got blasted by Saint Arya's holy strike, leading to the purification of the entire path within the range. Once the chaos finally died down, Arya flashed a harmless grin, chuckled, and asked Ishua how her brand new magic was coming along. Ishua snapped at her that she'd gone way too far, scrubbing impurities from the entire area until it turned into a sacred place, like it was destined for gods. She kept squealing with laughter, and he prayed she'd finally learn to rein in her powers before that wild excitement got her out of control again. Merchants there stared in disbelief, begging the same question: who were these two? Then he steered them straight to the closest village, and Ishua made sure he thanked him, while the merchant swore he only wanted to repay them for saving his life. He swore it was the first time he'd ever laid eyes on magic that powerful and on someone who could move and transfer it with terrifying skill. Arya bragged that only her senpai could pull it off because he turns the impossible into something real. And even she couldn't fire a spell on that scale by herself. She straight up said, Ishua has a bottomless stash of mana, can spot high-level magic at first glance, and then fine-tunes the power like it's nothing. He was so unreal, you'd swear he was a superhuman. The waitress rolled in a tray of Hue nuts, and the merchant snapped at her, saying, "Don't serve those unrefined nuts to my lifers." Lately, the mana supply had been running low, so she rushed to the boss, apologized for the mess, and begged him to get the refineries running again. Ishua snapped a question to the man about the mana shortage, and the answer hit hard because their village was so small they couldn't properly keep the refineries running, and forget about farming equipment too. And that's how their devices turned useless, racked up insane repair bills, and drained them dry, so now they're stuck, and if this keeps going, their village might not make it. Arya and Ishua locked eyes, and it felt like they were reading the same secret thought at the exact same time. Ishua leaned in and promised the man, "I'll help you fix that mana shortage." The man felt ashamed he kept leaning on Ishua for more help, even though Ishua had already saved him once. Arya leaned in and told him, "It's all good," like she'd just sealed the worry shut. Because her senior was genuinely kind, he simply wouldn't turn his back on someone struggling. He always stepped in to help. Ishua rushed to the refinery, and when he got there, he saw everyone crumbling in terrible shape. He finally confessed they'd been drowning in maintenance for so long, they just couldn't catch up. Ishu loomed over the refinery from just a stone's throw away, and figured he could totally handle this much. He slammed his hands onto the tank and poured magic into it, charging it until it brimmed to the very top. Everyone gasped as they watched him gulp down mana and fill every container in one go like it was effortless, even though nobody was ever supposed to do it that easily. Ishua gets that lesson too, so he keeps grinding, pouring mana into lifeless objects over and over until it finally clicks, because he had to babysit his party's magic sword and all their other gear. And while he was at it, Ishua also loaded the containers with a special setup that scrubbed the dirt right off them. And the moment he finished, the rundown place didn't just improve, it erupted into a brand new, fully built refinery. And the villagers went wide-eyed like, "Wait, you just fixed those mana containers, or did you magically fill them too?" And then strip off the rust and weld up the weak spots for good. Ishua also tweaked a few things to keep everything running smooth for a good while, even if he still felt like an amateur at this whole game. But the villagers cut him off. No way was it like that. Because what he did was something that would have taken dozens of the top engineers. The villagers are dying to know his name. And Ishua rolled right up, calling himself a totally normal mama porter. But after watching Ishua work his magic with his own eyes, the man couldn't help believing he was normal. He also quizzed Arya about herself, and she answered right away, telling him her name and that she served as a saint, standing there with a soft, radiant aura and a calm smile as she introduced herself. The villager froze at that news, and it instantly clicked in his mind if Ishua was showing up with a saint. If he has any hope, he's got to step up. He's the hero. He was 100 sure of it, then rushed back to say thank you, only he apologized for how late he was getting it out to the hero. Hero? Ishua froze in shock and blurted for Arya to help him fix the villagers' messed up misunderstanding. Arya was already drifting into her own little fantasy, convinced she and Senpai were destined to fit together perfectly. If she wants it, she can snap back into her normal saint self, but still, the villagers had already set their minds on throwing a party for the hero who saved them, while Ishua scrambled to make them see it was all just a misunderstanding. And that's when the villagers snapped, thinking the hero was too modest, like he had something he was hiding about his own troubles. They really respected that the hero didn't fake kindness, unlike those slimy scoundrels who play hero just to take advantage, and Ishua finally threw in the towel, because the villagers simply wouldn't hear a word he said. Then Arya lunged into him and blurted that he was her hero, while Ishua's nerves went wild, because she was way too close for comfort. But she didn't care one bit. She was probably wasted out of her mind. Ishua clocked how wrecked she looked and realized she'd already started down the bottle. He warned the villagers to stop Arya from drinking because she couldn't handle alcohol, but by then, she was already broke and out of savings. She even lunged for a kiss with her senpai. The whole celebration absolutely crushed it for everyone until poor Ishua got hit with the worst luck. Meanwhile, somewhere else, in front of a dungeon set for its next prisoners, Alan was plotting to storm that place with only the three of them. Mithya and Ritaru, the party's magic swordsman and sage, figured it was pure madness to dive into the dungeon solo without Ishua and Arya. But Alan wanted everyone to drop it and move on because he'd already gone through the trouble of firing those guys. He snapped at them to shut up and stick with him, swearing they'd prove they don't need that useless issuer after all. Maith and Riteru clung to their fears as they nervously trailed after Alan into the dungeon because he was the one calling the shots. And that's how the tale of a fallen hero and a monoporter begins straight into the kind of chaos that changes everything. A kid who would one day be hailed as a hero stepped into the story. Meanwhile, Ishua and Arya tore themselves away from the Axis village, and the villagers waved them off with bright, warm smiles. Arya practically beamed, because she finally got to see the kind of respect he truly deserves. She looked at Senpai like a hero, and now she grabbed his attention and demanded to know where they should go next. He slammed out a reply like, "I'm returning my hero's party license first." Then he rushed to register as an adventurer. So he hauled himself back to the newcomer town of Norbish. Meanwhile, Alan cut through monster after monster, swinging his holy sword with devastating moves again and again. He was sure this dungeon would be a total breeze even without his monoporter. In this world, the guild stacked every dungeon on a massive ladder of danger, starting at E and climbing all the way up to SS. Even battle-scarred veterans could get erased in a ranked dungeon like the one Alan was trapped in right now. Mithya and Riteru already knew the danger, so they stayed sharp and warned Alan to tread carefully, save his mana for the ride back, because right now, Ishua isn't around to bail them out. When Alan heard his name get thrown out again, he puffed up and bragged that he didn't need him at all. They'd be nothing but cowards if they backed out of a ranked dungeon. He was convinced mana shortages don't hit that often. But Mithya pushed to explain it because Ishua refused to let them ever feel the cost, believing a true mana porter should shoulder the mana drain for the whole party without them even noticing. Mithya spun out of the monster's strike, then shouted that they couldn't let those things close in and surround them. Ritaru the sage fired off her magic spells, blasting Alan's attacks with a deadly power boost. He unleashed that attack with a brutal surge of power, and it sliced through the monsters, ending them in a single strike. Alan then turned to everyone and asked, "Do you really think our party is this ridiculously strong even without Ishua?" The answer hit hard. It means we don't need his help after all. Overall, Alan's gut suddenly screamed that something was off about their whole situation. Then a lizard man slipped in behind Mithya. He blurted a warning, but when she went to fight, he realized she wasn't using her magic sword at all. Just daggers despite. Even though she was a magic sword woman, she knew the truth. Since Ishua isn't here, she couldn't let her mana tank, so she fought smart and tight, not reckless, and Ritoru warned her that her mana was seconds from hitting the limit. It drove Alan into a furious rage. He couldn't stand the thought that his party looked this weak, so he snapped back with another holy sword strike to prove his power. Then out of nowhere, a vicious headache slammed him from overdoing mono consumption, and he tore his throat open, screaming in agony. He screamed, "What the hell is happening to me?" And Mithya snapped back, "It's because you're running low on mana." Alan refused to believe he was dealing with a mana shortage after all. It had never happened to him before. Alan's mana tank is bigger than any normal person's, so as long as he sticks to regular attacks, he doesn't have to sweat a mana shortage. And now, ever since he got the holy sword, he'd basically gotten used to blasting out moves that gulped mana like crazy. The king already knew those holy swords would burn through their mana fast, so he lined up the fix and dropped it on the hero's party from the very start. So yeah, Alan had never once hit a mana shortage before. Now, Mithya shoved the question at Alan, could he stand up? But the moment Alan clocked how weak he was, fear hit him like a truck, and the lizard monster staring him down had him frozen. He knows he could beat it most times, but right now, he's out of chances. The lizard man only sees Alan as prey because it knows Alan is stronger. Alan's survival instinct screamed, and he bolted out of the battle, abandoning Mithya in the chaos. He then ordered Ritaru to tail him and keep him safe no matter what. Ritaru fretted about leaving Mithya alone, but Alan snapped that escaping this place mattered more than getting wiped out by some magic swordswoman and that hero safety had to come first. When she heard Ritteru was furious, she snapped into action. She decided right then. She kept marching toward Mithya, and as she went, Alan grilled her with, "What are you doing?" Ritteru wouldn't quit on Mithya. She was fighting for her life, and he stayed right there, refusing to let her go. And she made it brutally clear Alan had zero right to call himself a hero. Ritteru blurted out that she's got 0 mana left right now. So the only move left was to swing her staff and nail the lizard man from the side in a full-on battle. Alan stared in shock as a sage started trading blows with straight-up physical attacks. Mithya surged forward, daggers flashing, and Ritteru's opening let her slice the lizard man's limbs to ribbons. Mithya felt relieved as she and Ritteru took the lesson seriously, soaking up the advice on how to fight without mana just in case the worst ever showed up. Right then, Alan's scream tore through the air as Alan got cornered by another lizard man. Mithya slipped up behind the monster and choked it with her own hands, just like that, beating the odds to save the hero when they should have been the one dragging everyone else to safety. She made it crystal clear they'd never ditch their companions like Alan did. Alan refuses to back down until the very last second, fighting tooth and nail to make sure they get out of this place alive. After what felt like forever, they finally clawed their way out of the dungeon, and Mithya and Ritteru were so wiped out they could barely stand. They threw down through every fight with 0 mana and still hauled Alan along for the ride. Mithya, though she was just relieved she kept grinding her sword skills and didn't lean on mana every second. Ritteru finally admits, "I was a big help," but just as they catch their breath and realize they're back out alive, rage burst out of Alan as he snapped at them. "What the hell are you grinning at?" Because they couldn't even beat a weak dungeon, and when things got tough, they peeled back like cowards. He pinned the blame on the sage and the magic swordsman, saying the sage couldn't stop darting around, swinging her staff for brute hits instead of proper attacks, while Mithya kept relying on daggers instead of her magic sword. He bragged that he was the one who mowed down most of the enemies during their whole exploration, while the other two were nothing but dead weight, and exactly why everything collapsed. Mithya snapped she'd had it, and she screamed that Alan was the one to blame for everything because he was the first to drain his mana. Alan brushed it off as a badly timed headache, and then Mithya snapped, "Fine, grab your holy sword and try it right here, right now." But Ritteru stepped in, hushing her and insisting it was pointless to argue with someone like Alan. Mithya finally admitted it, she was right. Still staring at the hero, Alan, with raw disappointment and burning anger blazing in her eyes. Alan couldn't stand those eyes that looked down on him, so I told the other two we were done for now and headed to the nearby village to rest. Village, Alan couldn't shake that cold, disdainful look from moments ago, and he straight up shadowed them all the way to the closest village from here. They rolled up to Axis Village, the very place Ishua and Arya had visited before, and the locals cheered them in like old friends. Alan stepped up and introduced himself as the hero, then told the village lady they needed a place to rest because after failing to conquer that dungeon, they were wiped out. Just as she expected nothing, a shock hit. She ran into another hero on the exact same day. She couldn't stop gushing about the last hero she'd met, such a humble, amazing soul, and then she went right on to praise Saint Arya too. Alan let that question slip out of him. What kind of failure was this, and why were they calling him a hero? The village lady snapped at Alan, "Don't you dare badmouth Ishua, the hero of our village." But Alan kept repeating the same thing and even snapped that Ishua was nothing but a scammer and a fool who ended up getting banished by him. Mithya and Ritteru were stunned when they learned Ishua got booted by Alan and realized he never left on purpose. When Alan finally clocked that he'd been talking too much, he snapped into action, changed the subject, and begged the villagers to give him their best so he could finally rest while also handing over every mana recovery potion they had. The village lady leaned in and demanded, "So where's the money coming from for all this?" Alan shot a question. Are they really about to steal money from the hero? He insisted the villagers deserved the praise for getting to serve the hero, and that one line shattered his reputation in their minds on the spot. And Mithya and Ritteru just couldn't slam the door on his mouth in time. He kept blurting out nonsense. Like he couldn't stop? Mithya begged Ritteru to understand this only happens in rare special cases, but he snapped back that it wouldn't change a thing, and the villagers were already glaring at them like they meant to attack. The village lady was convinced they were nothing but vile humans. Only now, they finally showed their real colors, pretending to be heroes just to swindle people out of money and valuables. Alan wouldn't stop claiming Ishua was the fake, but the villagers saw right through him, because Ishua never even bothered to accept their thank you. And that alone proved he wasn't like a cheap faker like Alan. Alan swore he was the real deal. Then, out of nowhere, the next thing he knew, he was getting smashed by a no. An egg rolled in, and the villagers snapped. They started hurling whatever they could at them, shouting that they'd never allow anyone to insult their savior, Ishua, and ordering the fake heroes to get out of their village. Mithya snapped to Alan that it was time to run, but Alan only backed off, rage blazing through him. Then Mithya and Ritteru cornered Alan and demanded to know what he meant by banishing Ishua from the party. Alan snapped at her to shut up, bragging that he just booted an incompetent nobody who didn't deserve a spot in a hero's party. They couldn't wrap their heads around it. How did they just stand by and let something like that happen to someone as kind as Ishua? She decided to rush over and apologize immediately, and she made it crystal clear without Ishua, they couldn't even win a ranked dungeon. But the moment that name hit the air again, Alan snapped back and accused Mithya and Riteru of dragging him down. He screamed that if they didn't want to get kicked out of the party, then they'd better stop. The whole party went dead quiet, just like Ishua, once they heard the news. Alan suddenly realized, oh no, he might have just said something he definitely shouldn't have. Mithya and Riteru shot him the same vicious glare, saying Alan had always been like this and that she's fine with leaving right now since Ishua isn't even here. Riteru went even further, snapping that Alan doesn't deserve to be a hero and warning that if they follow him, they'll just throw their lives away. Alan could feel the danger closing in, and if everyone walked away, he was done. He pushed them to stay, insisting those two owed him for letting them in the party this long and that they should grab some mana recovery potions and plunge into the next dungeon again. But Mithya and Riteru had already made their choice. Then they launched their hero licenses at... Alan tossed a resignation message right at the hero's feet, saying it was pure disrespect to just dump a hero license like that. But they didn't care anymore. Not about the party, not about Alan, nothing. Alan bellowed, I'm the hero, everyone in the world knows this. The continent might as well have been nothing, because for those two, it changed absolutely nothing. Because they all knew Alan was a total jerk, they just turned their backs and walked off, leaving him to stew in regret over what he did. Mithya then turned to Riteru and demanded, so what do we do now? Riteru said, Ishua hadn't really ditched them like they were told, so maybe it was time to team up with him. Riteru chose to fire off her detection skill, and with a single hair of Ishua's in hand, she tracked him down. And just to be safe, Mithya even has one strand of Ishua's hair, so if she needs to track him with her own detection skills, she's ready. They both snorted at the coincidence like fate was just rubbing their possessive feelings for Ishua in their faces. They fired up the detection magic, and that's when they found the problem. He was right there in Norbish Town, living in the middle of it. As they pushed toward meeting Ishua, Alan's envy burned hot, twisting his mood the whole way. And he couldn't wrap his head around it. Why would a hero like him have to endure suffering just because of some cheap monoporter? Right then, an idea hit him he'd bring Ishua back into the party because getting kicked out must have left him desperate, and he was sure that the loser would light up, crying tears of joy the second he got the chance to return. He fired up his party detection skill, then used each member's license to instantly pinpoint where everyone was. Alan discovered Ishua was in Novich Town, so he bolted there on the spot to drag that trash monoporter back into the party. Meanwhile, Ishua was already in Nobish Town, ready to kick off his journey side by side with him and Arya, all in the same party. They bolted straight to the Adventurers Guild, and Arya stepped up first status check in hand to find out her solo rank. Her stats were mostly sitting around B rank, but her intelligence shot straight to S rank. The receptionist couldn't believe it, but those saint-level stats were exactly what she'd expected. After Arya's turn, she snapped at Ishua to get himself checked next. Ishua's nerves were through the roof. This was the first time anyone ever checked his status, and now he had to do it right away to officially register as a brand new adventurer. He pressed his palm to the crystal that instantly reveals a person's true rank. The instant it kicked off, the crystal blasted out a blinding, radiant surge of magic. The whole crowd and the receptionist too went wide-eyed because this kind of reply was coming from a monoporter who wasn't even meant to have that kind of status. The receptionist scanned his stats and every single one hit the high end, packed with B's and A's, but the real jaw-dropper was his mana capacity, which was sitting at SSS rank. No one had ever even heard of an SSS rank before that discovery flipped everything upside down. The receptionist sat there, staring at the measured device like it might have malfunctioned and something was seriously off. Right then, Arya snapped that she'd never once seen an issue run out of mana. The stats were shown the right way, so that was proof enough to make everyone believe. Then the receptionist locked it in Ishua, and St. Arya's party would kick off as straight-up C-rank adventurers. Everyone else stared in shock, because for as long as anyone could remember, nobody had ever started at any rank other than F or E. Ishua refused to let anyone give him special treatment. But that wasn't even the worst of it, because every single person there was circling them, begging to recruit him and St. Arya into their party. They swore they'd give them the absolute best treatment they could possibly offer. But Ishua got slammed recruitments hit him all at once, and the sudden rain of them left him completely overwhelmed. And he quickly clocked it, Arya couldn't handle all this social chaos because shyness was holding her back. He shoved everyone back, claiming he's just a monoporter and that he's not worth much. Right then, a girl screamed at the adventurers for messing with Ishua, snapping them to calm down. They were terrified of that girl, so they shut up and went still. She marched right up to Ishua, introduced herself as Diana, and made it clear she was the Sword Saint. If she was some legendary adventurer, that's exactly what he heard someone spilled, that Diana was actually an S-rank adventurer. and she was part of Hero Lillian's crew fresh off her victory over Ifrit, one of the Demon Lord's 4 demons under his direct command. Ishua's eyes widened when he heard about yet another hero's party, then Diana stepped up, threw in a quick apology for the chaos, and told him she had something she needed to ask. And then it hits. Would he really want to ditch out and join their party? Ishua never thought that even she, this legendary sword saint, would walk up and basically recruit him on the spot. But he refused to team up, insisting he needed to be alone with Arya for a while. And Diana pointed out that her leader had the stuff to become a real hero. And she's convinced Lillian would make an amazing leader for them, but Arya shot it down fast. Turns out Ishua's been getting burned lately by a hero who never bothered to understand what he can do. Diana told Lillian she wasn't the type, but Arya still couldn't buy it. She couldn't trust a leader who wouldn't even show up to meet the people they wanted to recruit. Diana went completely speechless, and the remark left her with zero excuses. Then Ishua shot her a straight apology, insisting that Arya was only worried about him and never meant to come off rude. Even though it was his first time meeting Diana, he felt in his bones he could trust her, and if Diana vouched for her, then her leader, Lillian, had to be the real deal too. Still, he's just been kicked out of his own party, so now he only wants to team up with people he already knows. Diana totally got what he meant, then her heart sank because he still wouldn't join her party. She broke down in tears, crushed by the fact she couldn't finish the job Lillian gave her to recruit Ishua. Ishua noticed Diana looked a little clumsy on the outside, but the way she carried herself gave her away. She was undeniably talented, and he could tell she meant it. But the timing was brutal. If it had been any other moment, he would have snatched up her offer without hesitation. Ishua figured that Lillian had to be an incredible hero because only someone great could pull in a hero like Diana for her party. Diana tore back to Lillian and apologized to her for messing up her task, only to realize Lillian was already out there, training her magic as we speak. Even without a magic job, she could tell clear as day, Lillian's magic circles were getting tighter, trickier, and better every single day. Lillian finished her training in a flash and she jolted her eyes open. She heard Diana rant about failing to recruit Ishua, and she immediately figured he must be dealing with something of his own. Diana can't believe it. Lillian was a born genius, and the hero job landed on her the moment she opened her eyes. And her number shot up even higher after she smashed one of the 4 heavenly demons. But no matter what, she keeps grinding with full focus, serious training, zero arrogance. Her hero duties stole her chance to enjoy being young until even her feelings started to feel watered down. Unless she hears that one specific name, then everything changes. She sobs as she squeezes Diana in a tight hug, begging her to tell if Ishua hates him. Diana can't wrap her head around who Ishua even was to Lillian, but she cut right to it. She told her that Ishua had begged the leader to show up and meet him face to face. And Diana said, "Next time, I'll go myself." But Lillian was so mortified, she couldn't even bring herself to try. Diana couldn't stop thinking about when Ishua became her first love, and the second Lillian learned he was in town today, she crumpled like a total mess. Diana urged them to follow Ishua in secret and snag a moment to rescue him the second trouble hit. Lillian loved the idea and slammed the decision into motion. Diana let out a breath of relief. Lillian was finally acting like the age she was meant to be. And for a girl her age, falling headfirst in love feels totally natural. She prayed that crossing paths with Ishua would turn into a lucky, game-changing moment for Lillian. Next morning at the Adventurers Guild, Ishua and Arya showed up ready to tackle their very first quest together, just the two of them, as a real party. And the moment they stepped inside, they were hit with a chaos storm, adventurers brawling like wild animals, clawing over which quest was theirs to grab. If you didn't want to get pulled into that crowd then Arya's eyes snapped to it, another thing sat on the side table, just waiting there. Learn those requests too. The moment the receptionist spotted him, she greeted him and then clocked that his eyes were locked on the quest sitting out on the table. Read out the quest because it was all about hunting down undead and wiping them out. They dragged rusted power reactors through the mud, and the hunt turned wild too because even tracking down a missing cat became a mission. Arya was obsessed with cats, so she decided she was taking one, no hesitation. An issue straight up decided to grab every quest sitting on this table, and when the receptionist asked if he was really okay with it, he nodded hard because he loved these quests. The receptionist figured he was being truly kind until he realized he'd take quests everyone else brushed off as not good enough. Ishua was baffled when the receptionist straight up said nobody would touch these quests either. The pay was too low or the reward wasn't worth the trouble. So from Ishua's side of things, these quests were a must because someone had to be freaking out over their cat. Later, he pulled a slick trick to tempt cats into the town square. Then Arya couldn't help asking how he was doing it. He shot back a reply, saying he was just tuned to the exact wavelength cats love then. From the quest, he finally tracked the cat down. While Diana and Lillian crept up behind him, they realized just how wild Ishu's skill was. Even if they're absolute beasts with magic or swords, it can still take them all day or even their whole lifetime to track down a single cat. And Ishua pulled it off in a jaw-dropping 30 minutes. For their next quest, it was undead subjugation, Arya's absolute specialty in, and she wiped out every last undead in seconds like it was nothing. Ishua would snap at her every time she pushed herself too far. While Lillian and Diana were still reeling in the back, they couldn't believe it. Those guys were wiping out undead like it was nothing, and Diana had never seen magic that strong. Output, and Lillian was still on standby, desperate for her moment to help the next time around. Then, on the next quest, shutting down those power reactors, Ishua took it all on alone, and not even once did he break a sweat. It felt so ridiculously easy that I started wondering if it was even legit to get paid for it. Lillian was already on the edge of her seat, craving any opening she could use to fix the wrong. Then a bunch of pissed off gangsters showed up, furious that someone else was handling the reactor filtering. They were the rival company of the one who needed help, and because of them, they couldn't even trust a maintenance crew. The whole gang jumped Ishua at once, ambushing him together, and Lillian thought this was it, her moment at last, but Ishu just shoved the innocent guy to the back, and he couldn't stop asking himself what move would finally deal with these guys, while making sure none of the nearby power reactors get damaged. He nailed down one decision, then flung a huge mana barrier around both of them. The gangsters didn't feel an ounce of danger, they brushed it off like nothing could touch them. Then their heads started pounding with brutal headaches out of nowhere. Ishua actually snapped a mono ring field into existence. He cranked up the density of mono concentration in that spot, and just like that, it boosted everyone's mono recovery power inside the zone. But if they weren't used to it, brutal headaches would slam into them fast. One of the enemies somehow refused to drop, and somehow the issuer tried to knock him out clean, quiet, and without leaving so much as a scratch. So he poured a flood of mana straight into the target's body until it practically overflowed. That would knock the target out cold before they even got a second to fight back. Diana and Lillian had no idea Ishua could pull that off too, but he handled the whole mess solo, clean, steady, and perfectly. The more Diana digs into his past, the more she's blown away by the insane techniques he's got in, and fresh, never-seen ways to unleash his SSS rank magic power. Lillian blew her shot too, frustration exploding in her chest, and she clung to the next chance like it was her last lifeline. But Diana was so sure of it now, there was no way the day would come when Izwa would actually need their help. Just then, like the universe couldn't wait, another newcomer rolled into Knobbish Town. It was none other than Hero Allen. He wanted to drag Ishu back into his party so everything could go back to normal. The very next day, Ishua headed straight back to the Adventurers Guild, same ritual, grab the quest, and hunt adventure again. By now, people know him for a bunch of reasons, especially that one guy who still steps in and helps out even when the quest pays nothing. The receptionist shut them down, but that issue still exploded into a full-on sensation within just a few days. But he was convinced they just misunderstood him, and he insisted he wasn't doing anything truly extraordinary. Right then, Alan burst in and shouted, "Ishua!" And Ishua nearly jumped out of his skin when he spotted Alan here of all places, so he shot back, "Where are Mithia and Riteru? Kios." And when he answered, he booted them too, calling them incompetent, as if that made sense. Ishua couldn't wrap his head around how Alan could be this stupid, tossing out people who were actually talented. But Alan didn't care a bit. He barked an order and told Ishua to drop back into his hero party. Everyone there, including Ishua, could see just how ridiculous Hero Alan looked. Alan sits there, baffled, thinking, what am I even supposed to care about? Then decides, screw it, just follow what he says. Alan suddenly caught bursts of laughter spilling from the crowd of bystanders. He leaned in and demanded, "So what's the joke here?" Someone shot back, "I heard the whole tale from Saint Arya about that dumb hero who banished Ishua." Alan snapped at him like, does he have any clue who he's talking to? The man shot back that Alan should already know, because he was the one trying to hire 2 C-rank adventurers there, and Alan nearly froze in shock, since beginners were only supposed to be F or E. People kept telling him, that's just how wild Ishua and Arya are, and he couldn't deny the hype. Even a cow could tell Alan was struggling, Mana was messing up, no question about it. Alan despised the way those random strangers stared at him like he was beneath them. Then Ishua flat out told Alan he was done with his party and he wasn't joining anymore. After he finished making his point, Ishu immediately marched off to pick his next quest. Alan was totally stunned as Ishua flat out rejected his offer. And to make it worse, even weaklings started mocking him, so he grabbed the handle of his sword and decided, right here and now, to prove his power to everyone. Then someone ripped into him, "Stop what you're doing right now." Issue aside, Diana, and she made it crystal clear to Alan fighting inside the guild was strictly forbidden. So if Alan was itching to flex his power, then yeah, she'd be the one standing across from him as his opponent. She declared she'd take Alan on anytime, and Alan froze, stunned by the sharp, strange intimidation in her words. He could feel this woman's danger in his bones, so he made a quick retreat tonight and bolted before things got worse. Diana was sick of that so-called hero because he couldn't even tell the difference between their abilities until she unleashed her hostility so boldly. He told Diana, "Thank you," like he owed her the world. And just like that, the help clicks. Diana finally gets what I meant when I said a bad experience with a hero can mess you up for real. She's praying Alan doesn't stir up more trouble for Izuha ever again. Then Ishua fell right into the usual grind, knocking out regular quests for a whole week straight. Then one day, he stumbled onto a quest demanding a trip to the elf village report, anything weird straight back to the guild, and when Arya saw the reward was 30 gold coins, she couldn't believe it. Coins came pouring out way more than the usual quests ever hand over, yet Ishua kept his guard up, because he'd never gamble with Arya's life on a sketchy mission. When the receptionist realized what she was asking, she pushed him to take the quest to the elf village, go there, see everything for yourself, and come back with word that it's all fine. Ishua shot her a question if it was really true, then why wasn't everyone else doing it? She snapped back that there was a reason and she absolutely didn't want to say what it was. But surprised this quest wasn't just a random thing, the guild handed it straight to Ishua. Because Ishua always cleared the dead-end quests, they decided to toss him a special prize straight through another dud quest. He fired off a thought so outrageous that it sounded insane coming from someone who'd only been working for about a week. But the grind he'd put in during that time was the perfect reason she just had to hand him this quest. She begged him to take it, insisting this wasn't just any trip, it was a full-on sightseeing adventure. While Ishua tried to shut it down, Arya lit up at the chance to go sightseeing with him. And right away, he blurted, "They'll take the quest." Was she so worn out that she needed a break, like a vacation after smashing quests back to back? Or was he just trying to figure it out and get her some downtime? He snapped up the quest and the receptionist plus Arya lit up like their prayers finally paid off. Lillian, catching their conversation from the side, suddenly got eager to hit the elf village too because Ishua was heading there. She craved one shot to earn his trust. Diana couldn't believe how insanely sharp Lillian's stealth skills had gotten, especially now that she was a full-on hero. She tried to tell Lillian that Ishua wouldn't need their help, but Lillian already marched up to the receptionist and demanded quests around the elf village. The receptionist snapped her eyes around the room and spotted, and he stumbled onto a brutal quest to take down a mutated ogre king. It was a rank quest, and right now, it was the toughest one they had ever faced. Lillian figured a rank quest couldn't shake her at all, and even the receptionist felt the exact same way. So they ditched hesitation, sprinted straight for the elf village to knock out the quest, and chased their shot at winning the issue of trust. 3 days later, Ishua and Arya finally rolled up near the elf village in a carriage, and they couldn't even believe it. Yggdrasil, the world tree, was so massive they could spot it from miles away. Ishua remembered the world tree, those ancient, legendary branches that guarded the elven village for over 2,000 years, purging the miasma to keep the land clean. Saint Arya revealed how the world tree began a seed, an angel planted in the monster-ruled lands, waiting to take root and change everything. A massive branchy tree towered up like a fortress, and people could pack themselves around it to live. It lived in peace, never once trembling at monsters because legends say this is the world tree that stood guard over the entire world and kept the nightmares out, and the Ishua remembered how much Arya adored that story. Ishua couldn't shake it. Something felt terribly wrong. He could feel it. Something was off in the world tree's monoflow, and it wouldn't leave him alone. He really prayed it was all in his head. While Lillian and Diana were busy blasting monsters, the non-stop brawl swallowed their focus, and just like that, they lost track of Ishua. Diana shrugged and said, "What can we do? We're right at the base of the world tree right now, and if this many monsters are here, we can't let them slip through and wreak havoc on the main road." Yong-hee. Diana couldn't stand the heavy miasma hanging in the air, and it started choking her lungs. Lillian slammed a powerful healing spell on herself to recover fast right there, on the spot, for which she thanked him, but they both knew that smile was only a temporary shield. They had to face wave after wave of monsters and get rid of that nasty miasma hanging in the air. Out of nowhere, another monster came crashing in. This time, it was the mutated ogre king, stronger, meaner, and built to crush them. That was the prize of Diana's subjugation quest. She was just relieved it wiped out the hassle of hunting it down themselves. She barreled forward and swung her sword hard enough to cleave the ogre in one fierce strike. Her confidence crumbled to dust when her sword finally swung, then bounced off harmlessly, landing not a single cut on the ogre king, and he didn't even need to dodge it. Diana stared in disbelief, flinging attack after attack, yet nothing she hit would land. Lillian pointed out that the monster didn't just grow, it leveled up after gulping down all the mana floating around it. And just like that, he shot up the ranks and got promoted straight to S rank from A. In that moment, Diana pushed Lillian to distract that monster just long enough to buy her a way out. Lillian unleashed her special skill, the one she unlocked through her hero job. It eats up magical power by the bucket. With that power, she could rip the party and their enemies straight into a virtual world she built from scratch. It's called Inherent Barrier Fantasy World, and in this place, they get to fight with a massive edge that swings the whole battle in their favor. It's the kind of chest-boosting skill a true hero would absolutely fight for. Ever since Lillian Imaginees, whatever she's imagined would happen here. Right there, Lillian ripped into Diana's blade with a surge of power, forging it into the absolute strongest sword she could possibly imagine. It was their deadliest weapon, and Diana slammed into the ground with one brutal sword swing, believing this would crush that monster for good, no question. Lillian wore confidence like armor, but the smile never had time to stick. When they realized the Ogre King had tanked the blow, his brutal, unbreakable body shrugged it off and left him completely untouched. Both of them felt it in their bones. This was the end, and they knew it. Now, they'd never laid eyes on a monster that could snap away an attack as brutal as that one. Even one of the 4 heavenly demons got hit hard by it. So yeah, this mutated monster's magic resistance went up like crazy, massively higher than anything before. Lillian warned Diana that her mana was almost gone, so Diana had to stay completely still because only then could this fantasy world keep holding together. Diana had to keep hammering away at that thing she slashed the Ogre King again and again, but every swing got ricocheted as her sword deflected off him. Eventually, it wore her out completely. Right then, the Ogre King lunged at her out of nowhere, catching her totally off guard. And the brutal club strike smashed into her torso, dealing devastating damage. It made her cough up blood, and then it slammed her flying into the distance. Lillian suddenly had no defense left as the monster closed in on her, fast. She refused to die in a dump like this. She dreamed of becoming the greatest hero of all and wiping out the Demon Lord for good. But with everything spiraling like this, she didn't think she'd make it out alive. She's haunted by the fact that in this life, she couldn't lift a finger to help Ishua. Right then, Ishua's voice cut through the air as he ordered Arya to stay right by his side while he tried to slip into that invisible space. Lillian never thought anyone could slip into her space that easily, because I can't do it without her permission. Yet he somehow managed to grab the ends and slip inside like it was just another ordinary doorway. From the day Lillian was born, it felt like the whole world kept showering her with attention. But all of that happened only because they figured she was a hero, so they believed they could trick a little girl without breaking a sweat. And dive into the hero's party, grabbing every hard-earned perk it brings. Lillian lived with constant vigilance, and more often than not, she was left alone with her thoughts. She tripped mid-step and crashed to the ground, and her teddy bear tumbled right beside her. She snatched it up, and when she looked closer, the thing was caked in mud and ruined with dirt. She crumbled into tears, feeling totally helpless. That's when she heard Ishu's voice for the first time. He called out to her, straight up asking if she was okay. She'll never forget that day, and even when death was closing in, it still burned in her mind. Lillian would regret it like a knife in her chest if she died without ever doing something, anything, for the person she holds dear. And right when she needed help most, the exact same person showed up, thank the heavens. Right as she got lost in her thoughts, she noticed the emergency, then she sprang into action and hauled herself out of the monster's way before they struck. He rushed to ask if she was okay, and Lillian shot him a grateful thank you for saving her life, so nervous standing that close to him that you could practically feel her heartbeat. Ishua snaps back to it years ago. He met her right there inside the castle. Then they finally spotted Diana trapped in a nightmare of a situation with no easy way out. Issa snapped his eyes around the area, trying to figure out what the heck had just happened. Just a few hours ago, everything was normal, and nobody saw the disaster coming. Ishua was out there, pacing around outside the elf village like he owned the silence. They kept slaughtering monsters to kill time, because life threw a wrench in it and they couldn't get an entry in, so they had to make their own way. Arya's heart sank. She and the guide both swore the village was open, and it turned out to be a total letdown. She snapped, and the monsters paid for it. As they grumbled nonstop, they kept demanding, "Why can't we get into the elf village yet?" While she was tearing through the forest, hunting monsters one by one. They blasted out a warning because right here, around every corner, rank monsters were swirling like they'd yanked them straight into a demon realm. But since Saint Arya tore through them so easily, she didn't realize they were fighting rank monsters until this moment. She clung to the hope that this time, she'd finally notice what was happening around her. Then they finally clocked it. The miasma hanging in this area was getting thicker by the second. Ishua slammed his monolink field down and forged a protective barrier around them. That move would have chased the miasma out of the air around them, and so they geared up and patrolled the areas around the village. He checked for any danger lurking nearby, just to make sure everyone living here stayed safe. At some point, he spotted something weird in that area, and his instinct screamed that it wasn't normal. He couldn't shake the feeling that this leisure quest was hiding a whole ocean of messed up weirdness. He sprinted to the spot that had been sending him that eerie feeling for days. Soon, they finally barreled into the spot where Lillian was battling inside her fantasy world barrier, Arya spotted it too the moment they got close, and she couldn't help wondering if it was all because of my asthma. Ishua studied the runes and realized it was a wild, tangled, magical setup, but once he cracked it, he knew exactly how to force a doorway into that space. He told Arya, "Stay right by me," and as they crossed into the space, he kept her close. Lillian's jaw dropped when Ishua broke down part of her fantasy world like he'd seen it with his own eyes. Yet after all these years, she still can't get the hang of it herself. Then Ishua leaned in and demanded to know who built this space just for her. She agreed, and then it hit him the girl he'd met earlier was none other than hero Lillian herself. The ogre crashed their reunion with a savage attack and in one blunt hit made the situation crystal clear right there, instantly. But this monster gulped down miasma, twisted into something worse, and leveled up into a higher rank. In a blink, he surged straight into Lillian's magic and drained every last bit in an instant. Then he took over the moment, ordering Arya to jump in and heal Diana right then and there. Arya slammed her healing magic into Diana and sealed every last wound fast. The second Diana opened her eyes, panic hit her. She couldn't stop worrying about Lillian. When Diana spotted Arya and Ishua, she couldn't shake the question, what in the world were they doing here? And yeah, Arya didn't hold back. She told Diana about the issue because she couldn't purge the miasma she'd inhaled. So he took matters into his own hands, then used Purimana to cleanse her body, scrubbing every trace of miasma away himself. Diana couldn't believe it. She was perfectly fine again, and realizing this method actually works felt like a breakthrough that blew her mind. Just got the jump on something huge now. He's learned a few tricks to dodge, getting labeled a low-tier monoporter. Now, Lillian blasted the ogre with a blazing magic fireball. But it didn't hit a single scratch. She blasted it with dozens of relentless attacks over and over, until the monster was finally drained. He's seen the struggle firsthand and knows exactly how brutal it is to pull off multiple magic spells like that. Lillian's hope crashed hard no matter what she tried. That mutated monster barely felt her strikes. So she stepped up like a true hero and told Ishua it was an amazing reunion because this time, she finally got to see him one last time and couldn't hide the joy. She swore if she had to, she'd stay behind and tear this monster down so Ishua and the others could break free, and she swore it on the pride of the hero. A hero and Ishua watched her courage shine, and it hit them. She was the kind of brave who earned the title of hero. While Alan would never trade his life for anyone, she didn't even hesitate for a second. But Ishua wasn't about to abandon her, no way, not ever, and told her, "You can't take down that monster by yourself." She couldn't believe he wasn't leaving, so confusion ate at her then. Ishua turned to Arya and told her to do the usual. After that, Arya blasted them all with a flurry of buffs and healing spells, turning their wounds into strength in seconds. Ishua ate every single mana cost for the team, so the rest of them could unleash their skills with zero limits. With Arya pouring all her focus into the support spells, Ishua turned her saint powers into an endless well, making her team almost impossible to beat. Diana and Lillian refused to back down and kept trading blows without ever giving each other a breather. Issued a command, "Go for it." Diana was the first to break through. She lunged in and carved a sharp little cut across the Ogre King's belly. Lillian finally saw their attack start to land for real, and that thing was beginning to take damage. Right out of nowhere, Arya blasted the Ogre King with her holy Nova Beam. Diana had seen it a dozen times, but up close she could feel that beam's insane firepower blasting straight through the air. Even that brutal hit only carved a tiny scratch into the ogre, so everyone knew this fight was going to drag on for ages. By then, Ishua had already snapped up a plan one that could take down that monster. Then he poured holy mana straight into its body, force by force, until it took over from the inside. Lillian snapped to it. She finally clocked what Ishua was trying to do. An issue is solved the moment he dumps a massive amount of holy mana into that miasma monster. Instead of evolution, everything would reverse and the monster would get weaker and weaker with every passing moment. Turns out, his theory nailed it this time. The Ogre King's power didn't just stall, it drained away inch by inch until he finally crumbled back down to rank 1. Now they could slice it down with ease, and Diana turned to Lillian, asking her to help. And then she forged the strongest sword her wildest imagination could conjure. Ishua stared in stunned awe at what that sword had carved into the world. Diana lunged forward and swung that blade with everything she had, cutting down the Ogre King in one brutal strike. Ishua and Diana locked eyes, then shook hands as she thanked him like that moment sealed the whole next chapter. She thanked him, then formally introduced her leader to Ishua. Diana leaned in and ordered Lillian to greet him the right way, starting right now. And she shakily spelled out her name letter by letter, like every word might break her courage. Drop the fact that they'd already crossed paths at the castle before. Lillian practically panicked because he remembered her, like it was still fresh in his mind. It hit him that Lillian might be way more timid than Arya. Diana then pointed out how weird it was to find miasma choking the air all around this place near the World Tree. They pushed toward the elf village to dig deeper into what was going on then. Right in front of them, they spotted a chunk of the world tree pulled away with her gone, which screamed warnings of a calamity on the way. Lillian pushed them to sprint straight to the elf village and get eyes on what was going on there. Ishua loved that she was always dependable, exactly like you'd expect from a real hero. When they finally rolled up to the elf village, the guards spotted Ishua and Arya. And yeah, we still remember they showed up here earlier too. Then Lillian stepped forward and introduced herself as Hero, saying she'd come to investigate the area around the elf village. The guard leaned in and interrogated her, demanding to know if she was the real thing. Since that Hero showed up and started calling himself one, the village has gone weird fast and now he can't stop worrying she might be a fake too. But they barely had a second to think, then they sprinted right past those guards. Because by the world tree, the situation had already spun out of control. Ishua felt a real gut pull of sadness because his very first trip to an elf village got rushed through like a fire drill, despite the fact that he'd come expecting to soak it all in with sightseeing. They finally pushed through the sightline, and the moment they reached the heart of the village, a voice they knew all too well rang out from right there. Belonging to Alan, he yelled, "It's not my fault." A few days ago, Alan had to charge to the castle and hand his achievements straight to the king. But he couldn't find the words, because everything in his world had been in chaos. Alan got hit with sudden summons from the king, so he had to race back from Nabish straight to the castle. The prime minister was waiting on pins and needles for the hero they'd honored to bring home some blockbuster news, because they were bragging, proudly, about every hero they picked. Ever since Hero Lillian crushed one of the 4 heavenly demons, everything changed. The prime minister leaned in, craving Alan's greatest wins, dying to hear some mind-blowing news. But Alan shot back. "I only leveled up a bit over the last few days." The minister demanded, "Is that really all?" Alan hesitated, then admitted he was right in the middle of grinding a ranked dungeon, and once he cleared it, he'd jump straight into S-ranked dungeons. But the king snapped. "I don't want to hear that same rrr." Fresh rumors about dungeon explorations were swirling, but now Ishua's real report was the only thing he wanted to hear. Alan seethed, and the question burned in his head, why was his name getting dragged back up again? Either way, if the king ever found out he was the only one left standing in the party, it would spell disaster for him. He claimed Ishua was sick, and it instantly rattled the king, so the king pushed him, worried out of his mind, demanding to know if Ishua was really okay. Alan doubled down and lied again, claiming Arya was with Ishua, and that he was just taking it easy resting for now. Alan tried to wiggle out with lies, then scrambled desperately to make real progress so he could finally bring the king a solid report next time. The king held his cool, grinned to himself, and figured, "All right, I'll wait and see." Then he leaned in and told Alan, "You've got an urgent quest talk to Ishua about it first before you take another step." After he heard the news of that quest, Alan kicked off his journey toward the elf village and pushed through until he finally arrived at Yggdrasil. He was handed a quest to scour the area around the elf village because mutated monsters have been popping up there more and more lately. He grilled the coachman and demanded to know, are there really freaky monsters roaming around here lately? The man shot back that there really were tons of reports about it, so that's exactly why they'd shut this area down right now. Alan's heard the rumor Hero Lillian already sprinted off to hunt mutated monsters out there, but somehow, Alan's not convinced she'll actually make a difference. The coachman swore he'd heard Hero Lillian was strong and stunning, but Alan only saw her as some tiny runt because he couldn't get past that gorilla-like swordswoman with her there. Alan decided he'd handle this alone, then take the credit for it. And because no monsters jumped out at him, he figured the rumors had to be fake after all. He thought his luck had finally turned until he wondered what would happen if Ishua showed up at the party. He'd rack up free fame without even lifting a finger. When Alan finally stepped into the elf village, he was so relieved he hadn't run into a single monster on the road. The guard cut him off and said nobody was getting into the village right now. No exceptions, no permission. Then Alan shot the guard a question, "Has Lillian come here?" And the elf guard fired back, "Who are you?" Alan shoots back with his hero license, claiming he's the real deal here on the king's command to investigate the elf village. The elf guard had never heard of a hero going solo, but Alan made it clear then, begged to be let into the village. Right then, the Queen of Leaves swept in and ordered the guard to let him inside. Chelsea, her beauty, hit Alan like a lightning strike, stealing his focus the moment he saw her. Chelsea finally snapped. She figured hiding their problems was pointless because they didn't even have a real solution left, so they had no choice. They'd have to swallow their pride and accept help from the outside. She grabbed Alan's hand, told him to follow her, and warned, "If this goes wrong, we could burn the whole world," so she made him promise to stay razor careful. Alan couldn't wrap her head around it. Why was she blowing this so out of proportion? Was this problem seriously that hard to deal with? But the moment he pictured King demanding a flawless report from him, Alan clung to hope, panicking to stay afloat and scout the situation first because if it proved too brutal, he'd bolt. Inside the elf village, he drew stares so weird, the villagers practically whispered, "Who is he?" They all looked like they were bracing for a nightmare, Alan included, because deep down, he knew whatever was coming next had to be seriously bad. So he turned to the Elf Queen and demanded to know if Lillian had ever shown up here before. Then she shot back that Alan was the only one who'd arrived recently. That question hit Alan hard. If she's not here, should he hunt her down and meet her first? Then greed hit him hard, and he decided this was his shot to fix everything alone so he could prove to the king he didn't need anyone else. Before long, he finally reached the World Tree. From up close, it was ridiculously enormous, like it swallowed your whole world. Alan spun around, scanning the place, and there it was, the weirdest thing in the whole area. And there it was, the roots of the World Tree were slowly rotting, like the world itself was starting to decay. The elves fought tooth and nail to keep it safe, but nothing could hold. Chelsea finally confirmed the World Tree was losing its vitality fast, like the miasma was crushing it from the inside. Alan figured the monsters were turning way more violent, and that made his blood run cold, which meant the whole region would soon be wiped clean of life. Alan felt it instantly. This was a disaster he couldn't control. But when the Elf Queen asked Alan if he could pull it off, Alan's mind immediately scrambled for a slick excuse to slip out. He swore he was only here to investigate. Then it hit him, those furious faces of the Prime Minister and the King flashed in his mind, which made him hesitate for half a second. Then Chelsea leaned in and asked, "What's wrong?" Then Alan leaned in and told her to drop it. This was his problem now. He stepped forward and said it straight up, swallowing every bit of responsibility to save the World Tree, and he even swore on his pride as a hero. Now, there's no backing down. Alan thinks he can at least try to splash some healing magic on it. As he headed down toward the World Tree, the Elf Queen trusted the hero completely, and even the elves from the World Tree Guardian team couldn't do a thing to change that. Alan had no clue there was an entire secret team of Aleves out there, sworn to guard and heal the World Tree. So he figured, if that's true, then he might as well go all in using his hero power and healing skills to make it work. He slammed resurrection magic onto the World Tree, bringing it back to life. And he swore it was some top-tier recovery spell one that could mend even injuries that should have been fatal. He hasn't even spilled it to anyone about his abilities since he walked away from the healing duties, leaving Arya to handle everything. Until right now nothing, not a single thing happened. The elves scoffed and called the spell a punchline. There's no way something like that could possibly work in a mess like this. Alan smirked and said he was only getting ready. Then he started blasting every kind of healing spell and anti-poison magic he could muster. But nothing was working, and the elves started doubting the hype behind Hero, like, if that much power couldn't fix it, they could have handled this mess way earlier. Alan's frustration kept spiking, desperation swallowing him whole because if he didn't report results to the king this time too, he'd lose his hero status for good. Then he spotted it right at one of the World Tree's roots. The ground looked wrong, warped and blotched, like miasma had pooled there and refused to leave. Alan yanked his blade out and swore he'd finally cracked the real root of what was going wrong. He figured it was finally time to prove he's the real hero. But Queen Chelsea looked at him like trouble was coming, and she demanded to know what he was plotting. Alan snapped at her to shut up and keep her eyes on the show. He sprinted to the swollen root and swung his holy sword, hacking off the overgrown part blocking his way. There, Queen Chelsea erupted in worried screams, while Alan stood tall, proud of everything he'd just done. Chelsea screamed at Alan, "Did you lose your mind? What are you thinking? Attacking the World Tree like that?" Alan swore he didn't do anything crazy, he only sliced out the spot where the miasma was piling up, because it was painfully obvious that's where it was coming from. Suddenly, miasma exploded and started spreading like wildfire through the World Tree. And Alan panic slammed into him, because why was everything happening so fast? All of a sudden, the Elf Queen collapsed into sheer despair because the World Tree was dying fast, right in front of their eyes. She told him roots were the World Tree's instinct to defend itself and that the overgrown path Alan chopped down was the final shield against the miasma. Alan snapped awake that he'd messed up, like, truly unforgivable this time. The elves snapped with rage at Alan and demanded answers, accusing him of teaming up with the Demon Lord. Alan tried to speak up, and he had no clue he was even doing it. He wasn't trying to cause trouble, so it truly wasn't his fault. Right then, Alan froze as a voice called his name, and he knew he'd never forget it. As he screamed at Ishua, he demanded, "Why the hell are you here? Fire back a question, what in the world did you do to the World Tree?" The elves leaned in and told him the hero, Alan, had hacked off the root that was choking the miasma at the source. He leaped down fast to get up close and check what was really going on. The Elf Queen leaned in and demanded to know exactly who Lillian was. Lillian shot back, "Yeah, I'm the hero," and told her she already knows the Elf Queen, Chelsea. Chelsea swore she used to rule as the Queen of Elves until the shameful event poisoned the World Tree and started its collapse. And now she says Chelsea doesn't deserve the crown anymore. But then Lillian stepped in and assured her, "Don't think like that, because it's still way too soon to give in to despair." And just like that, he slipped over and stared the World Tree down up close. Then he sensed the World Tree's soul calling from within, and he shouted to everyone that it was still alive, swearing he'd heal it no matter what. The Elf Queen felt hope spark in her chest, but the other elves refused to trust another human after what went down earlier. Lillian stepped in and soothed them, saying Ishua over there was still a brand new adventurer, just a lowly monoporter for now. But as the hero she was, she could guarantee every last thing. It was a promise that one day he'd grow into the man who could finally save the world. The Elf Queen spoke, and everyone knew those words could be trusted. And she stared into Ishua's eyes, and pure confidence lit them up. Chelsea told everyone, let Ishua handle it, and she couldn't help but want to believe in him. And either way, if things stay like this, the World Tree is done for plain and simple. But then she had Alan arrested after he tried to kill the World Tree. Alan yelled that he was the leader of Ishua, yet nobody bought it, so they dragged him away. Meanwhile, Ishua geared up to heal the World Tree, and he knew exactly how enormous that responsibility was. He started pouring holy mana into the World Tree, flooding it with cleansing light until the miasma was wiped out by the power of holiness. He also had to regrow that severed root over there, so he flung a monohull spell into the sky. The elves stared at it, baffled what kind of twisted magic circle was that thing now. In the next heartbeat, the magic circle started drinking the miasma like it had a thirst. Ishua claimed he'd build a monohull that could steal the miasma out of the World Tree itself. He kept weaving more and more mana holes across the World Tree, spreading his power farther every moment. Then tell Lillian to scatter more circles like that across the World Tree's body right where the miasma is thickest and strongest. He begged her to do it because he couldn't reach the high places, but she could float up with her magic. Lillian obeyed immediately, and with Ishua feeding her mana, she could slam down even the most complex magic circles again and again without a single ounce of fatigue. Their method finally started to bite, and the World Tree really was climbing out of its misery. Chelsea had zero clue this method even existed, so she snapped at Ishua. What on earth are you talking about? Ishua shot back that he was only a monoporter. Then he leaned in and told Lillian to keep going. Dump more mana holes. Right then, a guard elf burst in, screaming that things out there had turned ugly fast. Because their village got slammed, hundreds of monsters poured in out of nowhere, swarming everything in sight. The Elf Queen's stomach dropped the moment she heard about a stampede hitting right now when the World Tree was barely holding on. Lillian realized the World Tree can't cleanse miasma right now, so the monsters have turned wild and way more aggressive. Ishu can't leave this place, he has to stay and treat the World Tree, and Lillian is stuck here for the very same reason. Diana finally felt useful again, because the truth was terrifying. She'd been scared she wouldn't be able to help at all in this situation. Ishua told Diana and Arya to take the fight out there and stall the monsters while he and Lillian raced to heal the World Tree. After Diana and Arya reached the village gates, Diana rallied everyone, including the elf guards, and made it crystal clear no monster was getting past that point. She braced herself because this was her first time teaming up with Saint Arya, and even with them, this situation was going to be brutally tough. More monsters crawled out of the forest, one terrifying one at a time, and Diana ordered the archers to take care of the side targets. While she and Arya pushed forward together, they swatted down the huge swarm blocking the main path. Arya unleashed a holy nova, and the air lit up like a dawn that wiped out two monsters in one brutal sweep. Diana couldn't stop gushing because Arya's firepower was absolutely unreal. At the same time, the village's elves rushed in with mana recovery potions, keeping Saint Arya fueled for the long haul. She shot buffs onto Diana, then stormed straight into the monsters, no hesitation ready to take her place in the fight. Man, Diana's raw, brutal strength tore through the monster hordes and sent them crashing back like it was nothing. And with her and Arya working together like that, they carved out an opening and kept those monsters at bay. The hero's party just blew the elf guards' minds, and the guards straight up admitted they were crazy strong. But they have no clue how long they can possibly fend off these hordes of monsters in the hundreds. Meanwhile, Ishua and Lillian kept firing off monohull after monohull, one right after the other. And they just need a handful more to finally finish curing the World Tree and save everything. Diana took a nasty hit from one of those tiny monsters that slipped in from her blind spot. Arya dropped a healing cast and her wound sealed up in the blink of an eye. And then they tore right back into monster hunting, going nonstop with relentless fury. No matter how brutal the grind got, after racing for what felt like forever, they finally hit the wall. Every single mono potion was gone. As the miasma in the air kept piling up, getting thicker by the second. But once they realized the elves were throwing everything they had into defending the boundaries, Diana couldn't afford to complain or even slow down for a second, and they refused to stop fighting until the World Tree was finally restored. Meanwhile, a guard rushed to the queen and warned, the monsters will crack through that village any day now. Right then, she started evacuating the citizens. With things like this, the monsters will crash here long before the World Tree even gets cured. She ordered that anyone who could fight sprint straight to the gates, then told everyone not to worry, because if things got rough, she'd draw a bow and join the battle too. Ishua finally confirmed my asthma was gone for good, and I watched Mana surge back into the world tree like the world was breathing again. Now he's got to push through a little longer and keep that momentum rolling. Meanwhile, Diana's strength crumbled as a monster drove through her left leg, pinning her in pure agony. Arya went for healing instantly, but even she could feel her limits closing in. Her mana was almost gone. Diana clocked it instantly and snapped at Arya to back off, even if it meant she'd have to stand in front and battle alone while hundreds of monsters closed in. She darted her eyes left and right, and the whole situation felt like it was closing in on them. She swore this was the worst day of her life. To think the Sword Saint herself would have to gear up to die twice in just one single day. She swore to herself that if she made it out alive, she'd train harder than ever, because she'd never let herself get trapped like this again. Right then, she spotted two figures plummeting out of the sky like they'd just dropped in for a fight. He drove straight out of the sky and landed right in the middle of the monster horde. She recognized them instantly. Magic Sword Swim, Inmithia, and the sage Riteru blasting the battlefield with raw, unstoppable magic. They showed up right on time, and Diana couldn't stop wondering where did they even come from. Arya lit up to see her old party show up ready to help and totally turn the tide in their favor. A few weeks back, right after they ditched Alan's party, they split off on their own, chasing the road ahead to meet Ishua and leaving Alan standing there in the dust. They were thrilled to finally meet Ishua. Then the moment shattered when they stumbled on a group screaming for help. Monsters slammed into them out of nowhere, and they didn't even stop to think. Mithya and Riteru chose to step in and help those guys, knowing they'd be running late for Ishua's meeting. Because they just knew if Ishua showed up, he'd step in without hesitation and help anyone who needed it. And they were itching to dump every ounce of frustration from the recent chaos into this fight and let themselves go wild. After they just helped those humans, Riteru and Mithya wound up stuck trailing behind those guys while they marched straight the wrong way, away from the road to Nabish Town. They couldn't just abandon everyone here defenseless, especially after their escorts got wiped out by those monsters. Mithya made up her mind to get them out safely, then took off straight for Nabish Town. Riteru and Mithya got yanked off their plan and stumbled into a jaw-dropping mansion owned by some high-ranking noble. The noble leaned in and offered them a treat, who couldn't stop himself from thanking them for saving his daughter's life. He was saved by the medicines hauled in the carriage, those life-saving supplies that came right when it mattered. Riteru grabbed Mithya's arm and begged, "Let's go right now," but the noble guy begged them to stay the night, because if he let them walk out empty-handed, he'd regret it for life, and he had to thank them the right way. Mithya and Riteru pushed to leave right then, bowing low as they refused the offer and even the gratitude. Then the noble guy dropped to his knees, begging them to let him repay their kindness, because if he let the people who saved his daughter walk away, he'd never be able to face his ancestors again. Mithya and Riteru swallowed their urge to act, not wanting to crush his feelings. So they decided to stay the night, but then Riteru couldn't wrap his head around it. How on earth could they possibly stay there for an entire week? Week after week, the noble kept begging them just one more night. Please. Mithya couldn't wait another second. He wanted out right now so they could rush to Nabish. Riteru finally realized Ishua had been hanging around Nabish for a while now, and they couldn't afford to drop their guard anymore. Next morning, they wasted no time, packed up and bolted out to meet Ishua. But when they finally charged into Nabish Town, Ishua was gone like he'd vanished off the map, and panic hit hard because it felt like they'd arrived too late. The receptionist leaned in and told them Ishua had slipped off to the elf village lately, right to tackle a special guild quest. Mithya lunged to chase him immediately, but the receptionist barreled in and stopped them then. He even told everyone the king had just banned people from entering the land around the village. Riteru thought, if it's the king's command, they have no choice but to obey. But Mithya refused to sit around and wait. She finally found out that Ishua has been knocking out every leftover quest until right up to this moment. So she chose to step in and finish the job, because he's not here to help those in need anymore, and his legacy can't wait. They scooped up undead subjugation quests like it was the only thing that mattered. Pete finding quests that even let him carry the burden and care for them too. Eventually, they got drafted as new leftover quest hunters, and Mithya could only think about one thing, earning praise from Ishua the moment he came back. But then Riteru couldn't tell how or when it all ended up getting snatched and carried off by a giant bird. She jolted awake, and there was Mithya still sprawled there, asleep purely out of sheer boredom. And she fired questions at Riteru, yelling, "What the hell happened to you?" And Riteru just shrugged, saying, "We slept way too much," and reminded her that this bird had attacked them. And now, that bird looked ready to lead them straight to its nest, then feed them to its hungry chicks. Mithya refused to end up eating bird chicks' food, and the second they neared the ground, she planned to bolt for freedom. Riteru said that bird was most likely flying straight for the elf village, exactly where Ishua was standing right this second. Riteru waved off the king's order, saying it wouldn't bind them if a bird carried them away, and once it's out of their hands, they can't control it. So they played it like they were totally helpless, letting that bird carry them along. Mithia was sure a bird this size had to be nesting somewhere around the world tree. But when they finally drew near the village, Ritteru looked at the world tree and said the world was falling apart. And just like that, they burst into the elf village and watched Diana and Arya take on the monster horde all by themselves, fighting like their lives depended on it. Mithia wiped out monsters in seconds like it was nothing at all. So she cut through the chaos and slowed the monster swarm's momentum dead in its tracks. While Ritteru unleashed both brutal physical strikes and crushing magic, she cleared her side of the battlefield packed with monsters. Arya clocked it, those two had leveled up, now fighting smarter and squeezing every drop of mana. Diana couldn't stop herself. How was Hero Allen so clueless to banish skilled people like her? Then Ritteru shoved a mana potion into Arya's hands. And because of them, Diana finally got to rest and breathe easy, so she could slip back into the fight and finally be useful, no more dragging anyone down. Diana's jaw-dropping sword skills left Mithia completely stunned. And just like that, Lillian came crashing into the scene right beside him. She declared her entry and then rained down hundreds of flaming fireballs on the monster like a living nightmare. They were over the moon to finally get even more help, and Mithia was finally face to face with Hero Lillian for the very first time, the legend who'd already crushed one of the 4 heavenly demons. Lillian blurted that the mana holes were finally set, and Ishua was already taking over, focused on wiping out the miasma. Their group feels way stronger than before, back when it was just 2, Arya and Diana, and now there are 5 of them. Every single one of them clung to the same belief Ishua would take care of everything on his end, no matter what, and not a single thing would slip. Lillian burst into a grin the moment she wrapped up setting up the mana holes. It grabbed control of every mana hole and didn't let go. And little by little, the elves realized the world tree was raining down smaller leaves instead. Ishua finally breathed out. Those heroes had slammed the brakes on the miasma's deadly erosion. Emma, then he sent Lillian off to team up with the others and lend a hand. Now he just has to pour the holy attribute Mona into the world tree and kick the lost circulatory functions back into motion. The elves are staring in disbelief. How could one human juggle so many magic circles at once and still pour his own mana straight into the world tree? Even the Queen of Elves can't boast that kind of mana capacity, and Ishua is somehow keeping the whole circulation going all by himself. She'd make damn sure she never forgot Ishu's name because he was pulling off the impossible, and right then, Ishu was locked in on the flow of mana inside the world tree. Bit by bit, the world tree started to recover until the leaves finally stopped falling for good. Fresh new leaves burst back onto the branches, racing to fill every spot they'd lost. That means the world tree's healing magic is back in full force because, coming back again fully alive, like the world just turned on. Chelsea burst into tears as the world tree finally breathed easy again. At the very edge of the village, Diana and the others battled nonstop, tearing through monsters as they kept coming. You could feel the miasma start to thin, like the air itself was finally letting go. And just like that, the world tree sprang back to life and everything returned to normal because the purification was working again. And it looked like they'd be forced to clash for just a few more minutes right on the edge of breaking point. But then they froze because the monsters suddenly stopped pushing forward. Like someone had barked, "Do it now," and they had no choice. Mithia couldn't believe it. Those monsters turned right around and started repeating from the exact spot again, like their whole mission just face-planted, and she had no idea what to make of it. Ritteru said the monsters had to be getting weaker now that the world tree's purification function kicked back into gear. So yeah, somehow they pulled it off and saved the whole village. The moment they won, pure joy exploded everywhere, and everyone was still in shock like they truly never thought they'd pull it off. And just like that, everyone's jaw dropped because Ishua pulled it off and their respect for him skyrocketed. Meanwhile, the elf queen was stuck, clenching her gratitude because she couldn't find the words, so Ishua leaned in and told her, "There's just one last thing left." Then he dumped an absurd amount of mana into the magic circle like it owed him money, and launched it straight across the entire world tree, to make sure nothing ever spiraled into disaster again. The queen leaned in and demanded to know what he was doing. He fired off his reply and shoved his request into a stash of light magic, one that would keep the purification function from ever getting shut down again. Chelsea never thought he'd go this far for them until that exact moment. Everyone else burst back through the gates too, shouting Ishua's name like they couldn't believe he was there. Arya bolted right in and wrapped them in a hug, practically shouting, "We did it!" He shot out a huge thank you to everyone, especially Lillian and Diana for jumping in and helping them out. He stepped out and froze in shock when he realized Mithia and Ritteru were here too. Mithia yanked him into a tight hug and reminded him it had been forever since they'd last seen each other. Ishua never saw it coming. 2 of them showed up to help too. Mithia just smirked and said, Of course, it's obvious we'll always rush to help Ishua. Then Ritaru blurted that they didn't get here by choice at all. A bird basically carried them here by pure coincidence. Chelsea shouted at Isua, insisting he was the real savior sent down from above to rescue the elven village. And it's not just him, no way, it's way bigger than that. And honestly, he wasn't the only hero thanks poured out for everyone who saved the village and guarded the world tree, because they sure made one hell of a party. Ishua pointed out, it wasn't really a party at all, they just happened to be here at the same time, but Chelsea swore it was because everyone moved with insane teamwork, like they'd been working side by side for years. She didn't care what it took, then she declared they'd hold a festival to properly honor their saviors. That same night, the party kicked off and the whole crew was having the time of their lives, with some of them dancing their hearts out, while others dug in and savored the delicious food specialties of Elf Village. Chelsea told me that even if Alan hadn't landed that world tree crushing blow, he was still doomed to die the same way, and she honestly never believed we'd survive any of it. Ishua could only stare, picturing the crushing weight Chelsea carried as queen, and she vowed she'd help him with anything she could. Bowing in respect, then Ishua snapped, "Raise your head," and told her that having her throw this festival for them was more than enough for him. Chelsea sailed through it with zero problems, and she still put everyone else first, like the ultimate selfless hero. Just then, he heard a familiar voice, and it sent terror crashing through him. It was right there in his hands like it belonged to drunk Arya Ishua, never even clocked when she took another drink. And now she was stealing every eye in the room so wasted, she didn't even look like a saint. He tried to tell her to keep drinking, but she snapped back that even a saint could cleanse drunkenness if she wanted. So he pressed her, "Then why don't you just get sober?" Arya dodged the question, then leaned in and asked Ishua-senpai to grab a drink with her too, so close it was basically a dare to join in. Ishua tried to shout her off him, but right then he caught it. Someone else was screaming too. It turns out the sobbing girl was hero Lillian, breaking down because her feelings never reached Iswa. Then Diana snaps, yelling that someone should hand Lillian a drink, and it totally throws her off balance and out of character. Now she's stuck feeling like a useless hero, one everyone despises. Diana tried to steady her, but Lillian kept darting around the room with drinks in hand. Then Diana caught Izua staring straight at them. She told it like a familiar gut punch. Watching their drunk friends made the struggle feel brutally real. For once, everyone ditched their serious masks, hit the celebration hard, and partied until they crashed into sleep. The very next day, Ishua packed up his courage and got ready to leave for good. They even dragged Alan along with them, chained up in a cage because he'd racked up crimes here. Alan demanded they free him, but the elves blocked him cold because if he slipped out, they'd storm straight to the king and snitch. Mithia wants them to ditch the whole cage setup and just smash Alan's leg to drag him back. Ishu calmly told Alan, "Chill, we've got to report everything to the king, so keep your voice down." First, they're heading straight to Nabish Town, and from there, bam, they're off to the royal capital. The elf queen thanked him for everything, then leaned in with one clear wish. Come back soon. Send a heartfelt thank you to the Queen of Elves for throwing the festival. He couldn't wait to go back, so right then and there, he hit the road on the way back to Nabish Town. The moment they rolled into Nabish Town, Ishua bolted straight to the Adventurers Guild, and the receptionist lit up the second she saw he was okay, then she hustled him back into the group with everyone else. Ever since things went to hell near Elf Village, she'd been on edge until Ishua stepped in and swore they were safe again. And now he's ready to fill you in on the quest right from this moment. He spilled every last detail of what happened while he was there, and she went wide-eyed when she heard the World Tree was about to die, and somehow, because of that, they didn't just take on an S-rank monster, they also brought the World Tree back to life. The tree was just standing there. Meanwhile, the receptionist's newest problem was so wild it felt unreal. But all of it felt wildly wrong, and she couldn't help wondering who he really was underneath. He sent back, "I'm just a normal monoporter," but everyone behind him shook their heads like, "Nope, definitely not." The receptionist swore they only meant to say thanks with this quest, but now it's clear we've got to crank up the reward. No excuses. After everything they'd been through, Ishua didn't even feel like he'd done something big, and he was totally content to take the promised 30 gold coins. That was already too much for her to handle. She couldn't believe someone so humble could exist, but Arya was scared, because this humble guy seriously thinks he didn't do anything that mattered. The receptionist slammed the quest as completed, and with it, she checked off Lillian's quest too. She couldn't wipe the smile off her face when she heard Lillian, the rising hero, teamed up with SSS, ranked Monoporter Ishua, and she was kicking herself for not getting to see it in person. Right then, loud shouting erupted outside, and the receptionist braced herself, refusing to deal with the hero, Alan, and all the hassle that came with it. Alan doesn't just fall short of the name, he straight up doesn't deserve to be called anything like that at all. Alan yelled those four out because if they were part of his party, then every one of their wins became his too. They shoved it in his face that he was the one who banished them, and the adventurers were furious. Then they grilled Alan, like, so you want to kick off a war with the elves or what? They figured Alan should have been waiting outside the city so he wouldn't get crushed by all these insults, but Mithia wanted this guy to suffer even more. Especially after he nearly tossed her into a dungeon to die. Yeah, Alan learned the hard way. She's holding a grudge. Alan, Issue finally snapped and said it was past time now they're heading straight for the royal capital. And he rushed to the king, spilling every single detail. When they finally made it to the royal castle, the king's face lit up with pure relief. He was thrilled they'd returned safe and sound. He told her he'd already heard every single detail from the emissary of the 11 Queen. He can't believe why Alan would storm ahead alone and turn everything into a bigger mess like that. Alan didn't know what to say to that, so Arya blurted out that Alan had kicked Ishua out of the party, and once her and the other two heard that, doubt hit hard, so they all packed up and left too. The king's rage flared at the news, and Alan snapped at Arya to quiet down. Then the king snapped at Alan to shut up, and turned to Ishua, grilling him like, "Is this really all true?" Alan confirmed it, then told him straight up, the party didn't need a member who could only throw mana around. The king blurted to Alan that holy swords guzzle mana like crazy, so that's why Ishua was already in their party, there to foot the mana bill. Mithia also revealed that Alan tried to storm a dungeon with 3 of them, then ditched her inside to die alone. The king didn't even wait for more. Once he handed Alan the elf village investigation, he saw it, Alan was already alone. Alan flat out lied to him right to the king's face. At that exact moment, Alan can't sweet talk his way out of this. Then the prime minister stepped up and declared the whole thing with total finality. Alan's hero status was ripped away, right then and there. Alan begged the king for one more shot, swearing he'd rise back stronger and crash through with an unstoppable comeback. He begged Ishua and the others to crash back into his party, right here in... But they weren't buying his story anymore, not after everything. And Arya dared Alan if he truly deserved to be a hero, he'd have to wipe the slate clean, start from scratch as an adventurer, and prove he could become successful in no time. People could tell Arya wasn't talking like a saint right now, and Alan hated that idea from the start. The king nodded along too, because Alan hadn't gotten any better as a hero since the very beginning. And that foolish move almost sparked a full-blown disaster between them and the elves. Then he tried to bolt anyway, even though he still had to report every detail of the incident. So the king snapped his fingers and ordered Alan to be branded like a criminal, and carry that mark with you for the rest of your life. Alan shouted that he'd never let them label him a criminal. That's it. That's pure nonsense, way too ridiculous to believe. But the soldiers grabbed him and hauled him away, right on the spot to be marked. Now the king stormed in to lay down a command. He handled everything flawlessly, so I asked him, "Is there anything you want?" Ishua didn't think he deserved that praise at all. He insisted he'd already grabbed more than enough reward from the guild. The prime minister blurted out, "Why don't we hand Ishua a domain and a title?" The king loved the idea on the spot, but Ishua froze, thinking, "No way, I can't just step into aristocrat life like that." Arya told him, "This is huge for a commoner. Getting promoted to an aristocrat is a real game changer." But Ishua shook it off and said, "No worries, I'm good," letting the appreciation stand like a gift he didn't even want to overthink. His choice blindsided everyone, and he kept going, saying it felt like a real honor to be praised like that by the king. But he was an adventurer with fire in his chest, and he refused to stop. He kept pushing higher and higher for more. Right now, he's craving one thing more than anything: hanging out and traveling with everyone. The king took his feelings seriously, then leaned in and sent Ishua off with nothing but the best for every journey still waiting. Diana leaned in and asked Lillian, "So what happens now?" And then pushed, "Do you want to run off and travel again with just the 2 of us? Or would she finally team up with Ishua right now?" Lillian felt this might be her one shot, and with a shaky breath, she summoned the courage to call him out. Right before her voice could even land on him, Mithya shot forward and demanded Ishua bring her and Riteru into his party. Lillian's moment vanished right when she needed it most. Ishua pushed the question hard, asking if they truly wanted to roll with him and Arya, even though Arya wanted it so badly, because with his skills, he could slip into any party like it was nothing yet. Mithya and Riteru trusted him more than anyone, and they had the time of their lives with him. Ishua snapped that they were blowing it way out of proportion, and even so, he'd still love to have them show up at the party. Diana shoved Lillian forward and told her to go because if she said it too, the whole plan would hit harder. After that, Lillian shot forward and begged Ishua to add her to his party too. Ishua and the others shot each other looks when they heard that news. And Diana clocked it instantly. Lillian's voice sounded like a tiny kid begging to play house. Ishua leaned in and asked, "Are you really sure you want this?" Since she already stomped one of the 4 heavenly demons all by herself, she's clearly skilled enough to recruit a whole party of fighters. Diana leaned in and demanded to know what he was even trying to say. They reminded him that in an elf village, going solo would get them nowhere fast. They'd need skilled people like them to push things forward. Which turned out to be a nightmare to track down, so he shot a look at Arya, begging for her take. She believed Lillian was pure magic, an amazing hero, nothing like Alan. So she insisted on going with her too. With a jolt of resolve, Ishu snapped into action and made his decision. Then he stormed over to Lillian and demanded she let him and his whole squad join her party. Lillian froze in shock because what happened was exactly the opposite of what she wanted, and she'd been dying to join his party instead. But Ishua refused to disrespect the hero because they deserved to lead the party, no matter what. Lillian's nerves snapped tight, she heard Diana's words and blurted, "What do I do now?" Diana shot back, "If that's what Ishua wants, then we'll go along either way. We're heading there together." Alright, since they finally teamed up, they call everyone back, shout each person's name, and lock in everyone's role in the party. They just confirmed it, an all-new hero party is forming, and they're going to crush the Demon Lord. Meanwhile, deep inside the Demon Lord's castle Ifrit, they told him to shove through the swarm's front line. Undine, one of the 4 heavenly demons, snapped that if Ifrit dared show up, he'd get crushed again, and this time it'd be the hero, Lillian. Ifrit teased that her plan wasn't foolproof this time either, and that was the last thing she expected to go wrong. Then Sylphie, this tiny butterfly-like demon, offered her plan to blast miasma into the elf village and wipe it clean, and honestly, the idea wasn't even that bad. And Gnome, the 4th demon, was convinced his twisted ogre king had to be strong enough to crush that little hero. The 4 of them finally clocked it. The real nightmare wasn't the hero at all. It was Ishua, flexing cheat-level powers like he had the rules in his pocket. Then the Demon Lord finally spoke, and the whole moment snapped into place. Questioning whether a human could even exist with that insane amount of mana in their reserves at all, Undine said it plainly, his mana reserves, plus that insane control weren't just strong, they were downright monstrous. And now it's gotten even messier since he hooked up with hero Lillian. Ifrit told him they had no choice but to hit straight, not play games, and the Demon Lord nodded in full agreement. The demons held their breath, waiting for the Demon Lord to finally make his move. The Demon Lord declared that from this moment on, they'd clash head-on, no strength wasted, and a human hero would step up to face them. Undine felt completely lost, wondering who in their right mind would team up with demons like them and actually call it hero work. To which the Demon Lord already had the answer, and he straight up paraded the hero for everyone to see. It was none other than Alan scraping by, hunting quests just to survive, ever since that criminal mark got branded onto him. Rage burned through him his entire life, and every single tragedy he faced, he blamed on Ishua. And now the Demon Lord is plotting to drag the fallen hero straight to their side. Ishua and the others were riding through the roads in a rattling carriage as the journey kicked into high gear. And Lillian finally made it official with him when they were right near Amdia's territory. Ishua told Lillian to drop the formalities since they were both in the same party now, but she just couldn't adjust. And he tried the same stunt on Mithya and Riteru, only for them to cling even harder to the whole address you formally thing. A week had flown by since they forged their new party, and right now, they were on their very first mission, hauling the White Dew elixir straight into Amdia's territory. Turns out, Lord Iamdia was the very same noble Mithya and Riteru had bumped into earlier. She told him, "Back then, we helped carry it because that White Duke's elixir was being transported even then." Next, they rode straight to the Lord's mansion to personally escort the carriage. When they finally got there, they saw people writhing under a mystery illness back then. It was only the Lord's daughter and a few servants, now they need so much more, which means the sickness has spread and more victims are trapped there too. He couldn't shake his worry for the people there, so he ordered the coachman to hurry up. Diana, walking them outside to keep them safe, guided them all the way to the Lord's mansion and let them know they'd finally arrived. When they finally arrived, Lord Amdia himself stormed up to the entrance and greeted them in person. He grinned when he finally saw Mithya and Riteru again. Mithya never thought they'd show up here this fast, and seeing Lord's daughter looking okay, that relief hit her hard. And the fact he's still burning through a huge pile of elixir tells you one thing. More sick people are out there, waiting for help. Amdia warned that strange diseases have swept across their territory like a wildfire. Doctors have tried everything, but nobody can pin down what's causing it. Only the top-tier healing potion, White Dew Elixir, actually manages to work. Riteru finally understood why everyone's been flooding the quest lately just to gather Ringersu herbs. Ishua promised Lord Amdia they'd raid the neighboring territories for more herbs and elixir and haul it all back here, but Lillian snapped back that none of that would fix what was really going on. Listen, she's making her move. As she begged Lord Amdia to let them dig into this bizarre disease, Lord Amdia never even thought to ask for their help, and later, Lillian rushed to apologize to Ishua for hijacking the investigation when their real mission was to deliver the elixirs. Ishua didn't bat an eye. He figured they'd root out what caused this disease while delivering elixir to more villages, and it never even crossed his mind to hunt the source until Lillian pushed him to do it. He's convinced she's really playing the hero, so he's ready to trust her judgment. Lillian felt her heart light up from his belief in her, but then he leaned in and demanded she call him Isua. And when she tried, she told him it wasn't possible right now. Then Arya leaned in and grilled Lillian. Why did she even want to investigate in the first place? Lillian shot back that once she finally crushed, he hinted that Undine was cooking up a sinister scheme, one that would drag humans right where they belong. Lillian snapped in surprise when she heard the news, and it was on the verge of spilling the whole plan. But he clamped his mouth shut, making sure nobody guessed their plan to swarm the world tree with monsters and erase the elf village. Then, without a second thought, it bolted away using a teleportation spell. Ashua, Arya, and Lillian felt something terrible was about to hit, only to realize, moments later, that the danger they feared was already handled. Before long, they barreled into the next village. Lillian leaned in and ordered them to start unloading the stuff right away. The coachman looked at the scene and thought, this has got to be the weirdest party we've ever stumbled into. They expected to just push through their quest, but nope. Once they started it, they also dug into what was really causing the trouble, instead of sitting back, because letting the transport quest ride would have dragged the reward upward over time. Mithya said it was a clever trick, and Ishua snapped back, don't think that way. Mithya tried to play it off like it was just a joke. Then Ishua shot back that it was a huge relief seeing they had a good-natured leader in their party, even more than he ever could. Then they kicked off the elixir deliveries, and while they were at it, they dug into where the disease was really coming from. The doctor running this place told everyone, we've been crammed in this hut we threw together in a hurry. And when they finally got there, dozens of patients were sprawled out, grimacing like it hurt to even breathe. Lillian and the others freaked out because the number of patients was absolutely out of control. The doctor warned them that more people were packed into other huts just like that, about 100 patients in total. And because nobody knew what was causing it, they could only keep hammering healing magic and then pray the patient's own immune system would finish the fight. For now, they were just grateful the White Dew elixir actually worked, but it still couldn't be brewed fast enough to save everyone who was desperate for it. Ishua couldn't believe this was even his kind of problem. This was way outside his expertise. But he couldn't stand by. He wanted to step in the way Lillian did, so he demanded an investigation and asked if he could examine the patient's condition. And the doctor didn't care a bit. He was downright honored to help a hero who'd taken down one of the 4 heavenly demons and the monoporter who'd saved the world tree. Ishua strode up to the patient, pressed his forehead to theirs, and checked every inch of their body. Ishua kept watching this patient to see if the demon lord's scheme had sickened him, and then he noticed something that was seriously off, and warned everyone that the patient's monobalance was busted, and that's exactly why they kept feeling sick. The doctor looked totally lost, so Ishu cut in and said, see this guy? He's got an insanely tiny amount of dark mana. Everyone is born with a mana balance right from the start, like a tiny blend of every mana type, so if even one piece gets thrown out of sync, sickness hits hard. The doctor stared in shock because Ishua could feel mana flow so finely he didn't even need tools, just one touch on the skin. Then he raised a claim maybe he could tweak the mana balance too. He paused for just a few seconds and the sick patient's pain vanished like it was never there. Like sickness was never even in his body. His mother burst with joy when she finally saw her son back to full health. And the doctor remembered it one of those white elixirs, made to patch up monobalance in the body. Ishua checked the other patients too, and sure enough, they all showed the exact same symptoms. That doctor had never not once heard of someone who could move mana freely and even shift it into every attribute at will. Ishua stepped in to help everyone, one by one, while Arya kept blasting healing magic to erase their pain until it was finally gone. Shihori hurled healing magic across the entire building, and the doctor just stood there, staring as miracle after miracle exploded before his eyes. Ritteru jumped in too, helping get the elixir ready. Lillian decided to dig into the village herself because the people weren't just sick, they were starving for dark mana. Diana and Mithya hurried to the villagers to beg for advice. Ishua's face lit up. Everyone had already grabbed their roles, and they were all going all out to help. If that was the call, then he jumped right back in and handled his part too. After a while, the village chief stepped in to help the rest of the staff. The moment he spotted Ishua stepping out of the hut, he demanded to know what was going on and whether he'd uncovered anything. Ishua told him the only problem left was this. Those patients who had just recovered were suddenly begging to help them. Arya let out a breath of relief. Good news at last. They looked like they were finally okay. The villagers stared in disbelief because to them, this felt like a real miracle. They were screaming Ishua's name, and I swear nobody could process it. They just got the chance to watch a brand new legend get born. If you told them they were exaggerating, you'd still be wrong because it was thanks to everyone pitching in that it even became possible. Right then, Lillian shot back from the investigation, and she burst into the room and told everyone she'd snagged a vital clue. Her words lit a spark in everyone's hearts, and suddenly they all started treating Ishua like their true leader. Ishua squared them up. Lillian was the leader, and he spotted even members of their own party mixed in among the crowd, cheering like they already knew they'd win. Meanwhile, just outside the village walls, the tension hangs in the air. People branded with the mark of criminals on their faces were gearing up for a dangerous scheme. They shoved the newcomer into his first job and demanded he nail it, no excuses, no misses. And he went door to door in that village, hawking medicines to them while the disease was tearing them apart. The newcomer fired the question at them, and then it hit them. Those medicines were all fakes, loaded with brutal side effects. The criminal snapped at the newbie to just swallow his new life as a criminal. And surprise, the guy was Alan, the so-called former hero. Once Alan got branded a criminal, he rushed to snag quests in the knobbish town, but they slammed the door in his face and wouldn't even let him touch E-rank work. The receptionist flat out told him he'd only be able to grab leftover quests because that criminal mark on him screamed trouble. Alan cursed it under his breath, and just like that, he couldn't even scrape together any decent paying quests. He swore the whole mess was his fault. At this pace, he wouldn't even have enough to cover the price of one lousy night at the inn. Right then, a pack of criminals slid up to him and yelled, "Call." Alan confronted him as a fallen hero, calling him out, then demanded to know who he was. But the guy stormed right up to him and dropped the news that they had a perfectly tailored quest waiting for him. Alan clocked it instantly. Those weren't strangers at all. They were right out of the criminal guild. Then he barked, "Get off now." He'd never fallen that far just to join some criminal guild. The criminals slid him a feast so irresistible that Alan couldn't help but take it. Alan was starving, so he couldn't resist and gave in to temptation, and made it crystal clear he'd hear them out first, then decide on the quest. While he was chowing down in the carriage, the criminal ordered him to eat outside the carriage because he'd been put on guard to protect it. Alan yanked himself out of the carriage the moment he finished eating in a hurry, and he cursed everything all over again because he was stuck working with the criminal guild. He figured it'd be a one-time quest, grab the cash, and then finally sit back and think about his life. Then he turned to the others and demanded, "What's in the cargo?" They told Alan it was medicine meant to be delivered to a village hit by a disease, then sold for profit, and at first he actually swallowed it and believed this might be a real job. Until the criminal finally cracked and told him those medicines were called Phoenix pills. They hit like a miracle the moment you took them. Everyone swore they were finally fine, but days later, the mind would snap into chaos and brutal headaches would start tearing through them in this kingdom. Even owning the medicine was treated like a serious crime. And just when you think Alan was helping them carry it, that last shred of humanity in him finally snapped. He felt like quitting the quest right then and there. But the criminals snapped him back to reality. They reminded him he'd already stuffed himself and even let slip they had a plan, so if he tried to leave, they weren't letting him off that easy. Alan could feel the danger closing in, so when he tried to leave, the criminals grinned and told him not to worry, like they were just going to sell the meds and vanish to the next village before the side effects hit. Then it clicked for Alan. These weren't just bad guys, they were true scum, and he refused to become like them. But when they finally got close to the village, they ordered Alan to march in there and sell those medicines. So Alan got hauled into the village, then started pitching miracle medicines. From the royal capital, he claimed they could cure every disease. The moment that villager heard him, they froze right on the spot, like the words hit a switch in their soul. Alan couldn't believe the audacity of that shady claim. Then the villager stared at him with pure, breathless admiration. "I can't believe there was medicine like that in the royal capital, and this guy hauled the whole load all the way here just to bring it." A villager grabbed the lead and steered him right into the village. And Alan just stared in disbelief because somehow, against all odds, it actually worked. Inside the village, he spotted a crowd packed into the center, and every alarm in his gut started screaming that something was about to go terribly wrong. A villager leaned in and told him heroes had rolled into the village a while back, cured everyone, and now Alan was finally noticing a messed up pattern. And just like always, right in the middle of all this chaos stood Ishua. People treated him like royalty, even here. More women gathered around him too, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And if Alan keeps climbing to fame like this, Alan just knows Ishua is going down in history for good. And just like that, they stamped him as a criminal and shoved him into hawking fake medicine. Alan shot his hand up and shouted, "Stop!" He burst out yelling that he'd found a cure-all medicine here, way cheaper than that white dew elixir. At first glance, I recognized Alan and grilled him, "Where did you get that medicine?" The village doctor whipped around and demanded of Sage, "So what's going on?" And when Alan remembered that a sage knew medicines inside and out, fear hit him hard. So she had know instantly. Riteru shouted to everyone, "That right there is a Phoenix pill." It was a deadly drug with brutal side effects, and even possessing a single dose was a straight-up crime. Alan thought this was the end, then the world refused to let go. Next, Alan's move shocked everyone because nobody expected him to dive into something like that, and Lillian just couldn't turn a blind eye when a hero showed up. And since Alan was already out for the count, he snapped, grabbing the little girl nearby as a hostage and roaring that it was all happening because of that monoporter. Ishua screamed, "What the hell are you doing?" But Alan warned everyone back off, or this child won't make it. Lillian slammed the truth that the former hero, now a full-on criminal, had hit rock bottom. Then she unleashed her fantasy world magic and trapped Alan inside her virtual space, sealing him in like it was his doom. Alan didn't see it coming at all, and the shock hit him hard. He'd actually lost the kid he'd taken hostage. He burst out, "What the hell is happening?" Lillian leaned in and told him, "I just dropped you into the world I imagined right here, right now. And there's no way he's taking a hostage in here." Alan made them stop and demanded they listen to his side of the story first. But the moment he understood it, those people wouldn't believe a single word, because they stared at him with pure, burning hate. Alan leaned in and asked them straight up, "Do you honestly think I'd join a criminal guild just because I wanted—" But the stares of distrust kept climbing higher. So Alan begs for one more chance, and this time he's about to rocket up the ranks immediately. They keep staring at him like he's let them down, pure disappointment in every look. Alan despised it with every fiber of his being. So he grabbed a holy sword and went straight at them, ready to fight with it in hand. Issue a new one before it turns into a full-blown mess. So he snapped a mana field around them in a blink, and Alan suddenly realized he was trapped inside yet another brutal barrier. Out of nowhere, Alan's head started pounding with brutal headaches that raged on them because one single thing overloaded their attention. Ishua had begged Alan to train in this mana field before, but since Alan never showed up for the practice, the heavy mana density hit him like a truck and straight up gave him a brutal headache. Alan was trapped like he couldn't move, and Ishua was seconds away from ripping every drop of mana out of his body just to keep him awake, so Alan fought to stop him. But it was already over for Alan. His knees buckled, and darkness swallowed him before he could fight back. Then the troops were ordered to drag Alan back to the royal capital. While Ishua and the others were set to start investigating, the soldiers grabbed Alan and dragged him off, leaving Ishua crushed with grief. He can't believe Alan would sell illegal drugs while literally wearing the mark of a criminal, and now he's left wondering, will they finally put Alan to death this time, which crushes him even more. Arya snapped, "It's not your fault." Then Diana leaned in and demanded to know what clue Lillian had unearthed about the disease. Lillian told them about a hidden magic circle wrapped around the well, quietly sucking in the dark mana and draining it away. The moment it happened, they demanded everyone back, no exceptions, stay away right now. Lillian leaned in and told him the truth. More of those magic circles hid in the well, and there were even more stashed around the village. Ishua finally pieced it together. This whole incident, this deadly disease, was cooked up on purpose by someone. While Alan was dealing with everything, the criminals lurked close by, watching his every move. And they watched him get caught so fast on his very first task. Then they leaned in and asked their client, "Is this really everything you want?" She smirked. Yeah, it was a yes. And now the criminals were demanding their payback for the job. She yanked the cloak off in one swift motion, and the guys convinced themselves she'd pay with her body instead of her money. But they had no idea she was a demon. And once they stopped being useful, she slaughtered them without mercy. She paid them back for their service with death. And then she couldn't stop wondering whether the old hero, Alan, who used to be... After enduring unspeakable pain, he finally snapped and turned his fury on all of humanity. Then they tore into the place where the disease was born and finally reached the spot people swore the Calamity Dragon was curled up, dead asleep. Ishua and the party stared into the magic circles and realized they weren't the only ones. More were hiding in other villages and towns. Lillian pointed out, it only seemed to hunt people with weak magic, and they couldn't shake the question, where was all that mana piling up? You couldn't tell if this move was straight from the Demon Lord's wicked playbook. For now, he decides to wipe them all out at once because it's the only way to keep everyone safe. They figured it would take forever to wipe out every last magic circle across the whole territory. Ritteroo's convinced the stolen mana must be controlled by a hidden core mechanism. No matter what it's for, it all has to get shoved into one place, so if they smash that center, they managed to fix it fast no long, drawn out struggle needed. Ashua was like, I've got this. He used mana sensing to nail the center, then tweaked the magic circle to seal it. Nobody saw it coming. He pulled off the kind of magic even the experts can barely manage, and he rewrote it while it was still active. Issue the thought that it has to be done this way so the people behind it don't realize they're being reverse tracked. He broke down the entire process step by step until it all clicked. But they caught none of the words he was throwing at them, only that they could still count on him. Ishua took a slow breath, then carefully dripped his mana into the magic circle drop by drop. And from his view, it felt like he'd become the mana itself, like he could see every drop as it surged through him. He spotted the mana flow crashing into one point, like a tidal wave gathering all at once, ready to unleash an insane amount of power. And that place was out by the mountains, right where the water springs are born. He fired off a sharp request, demanding they sprint and bring him a map like, right now. Then he drew a big cross on the spot and declared, "There'll be a massive cave at the base of this mountain. This is where all the mana is being pulled in and gathered." Lillian froze in shock. because the legend of the white-scaled dragon was said to haunt that very place. The white-scaled dragon, dubbed the Disaster Dragon, was feared by everyone. And the name basically says it all. The legend painted that dragon as an absolute nightmare, so devastating it sounds impossible. Ishua and the others didn't slow down for a second. They slammed into the spot and uncovered the Disaster Dragon's cavern, and Ishua nearly lost it at how much mana had been tucked away so neatly. He could feel the traps lurking ahead, so he blared out a warning to everyone, and they were instantly relieved he'd been with them to spot danger. Mythia said the Disaster Dragon was the nightmare from fairy tales, an evil dragon that wrecked countless countries, and every hero in the past threw everything they had just to seal it away. Lillian flat out told him this spot used to be an A-rank dungeon back when it was deadly even for monsters. And one day, right at the party's wild finale, they stumbled on the Disaster Dragon passed out and buried deep in sleep. After that, a massive boulder sealed the cavern shut, but now it's like someone hauled it away and deliberately opened the cave for whoever's coming next. Ishua felt a wave of reassurance knowing there was finally a hero who could crack the nation's secret information, making the whole ride wildly more interesting as a hero's party member. Lillian pointed out that someone was blasting an insane amount of dark mana into this place. It could be the sign that someone was gearing up to awaken the Disaster Dragon. She knew that if they ran straight to the king, the royal army would get sent here at once, but it would take ages, and that dragon would most likely already be awake by the time they arrived. So they had to move fast, stop the Disaster Dragon from waking up, or it all goes up in flames. Mythia couldn't shake her worries. This was a ranked dungeon, and that meant the kind of monsters that crush you were guaranteed to show up. She couldn't shake the memory of that ranked dungeon. She almost died in it, and the trauma stuck like glue. Eventually, the party crashed straight into monsters, and Mythia sprang into action, took the lead as the vanguard, tearing ahead to clear the way and it hit her, watching Ishua, that they didn't even need mana recovery while they fought together. They kept charging ahead, smartly rationing their mana like pros. Ritaru spotted mana splitting into two paths up ahead, and that scream of a trap told him it was meant to break the intruder's rhythm and confuse them fast. Lillian grabbed the responsibility from him. She mapped the skill from here, and just like that, it pulled back the curtain and gave her a quick, clear glimpse of everything around her. She barked an order. Everyone hit the right path. After trekking that path, Arya spotted the map and demanded to know what every dot on it meant. She told them, "Wait, something's ahead. I can feel it in my bones." And every time she felt treasure hiding nearby, she'd just plunge her hand into the map and pull the items out, no trek required. Yeah, this was a cheat level skill, the kind that makes a hero feel like they're winning and still somehow end up totally broke. Mythia swallowed a sharp breath and admitted her last ranked dungeon run left her completely broken. But now that they've got this party, it feels weirdly, almost shockingly easier. They finally slipped into the dungeon's deepest core and swung the gates wide open, bracing themselves for whatever waited behind that door. Then bam, they caught a stench crawling out from inside, like rotten meat rotting the air. They uncovered the truth. Those shady goons were using the dead dragon's corpse as their sick experiment base. Ishua and the crew spot the dragon literally rotting to the bone. Doesn't that scream, "This thing's about to turn deadly," and scare them? Then the leader of those shady goons barked orders at Ishua and his party. For daring to barge into this place, Ishua couldn't believe it. Those guys were actually humans. Yet she still chose to risk everything for humanity so dangerous it could shake the whole world. Lillian marched up, introduced herself, and blurted that she'd made it here after tracking a deadly disease. The humans there stared at Lillian like she was a legend because she was the one who actually beat their master, Ifrit. So that means those intruders weren't just strangers, they were the Demon Lord's enemies. Mythia blared that those guys were Demon Lord's followers and that they had to be sent by the Chaos Divine Guide Society. A wild bunch of religions bowed down to the Demon Lord and swore the only way to save humanity was to die for him. Lillian snapped at the man, asking if they were really doing all this on the demon's orders. "My lord," the man shot back, "we've never laid eyes on the Demon Lord before, but if we can bring that Disaster Dragon back to life, he'll surely know exactly who we are." Ishua couldn't believe it. These guys were putting people through hell just to be noticed by the Demon Lord, like the pain was worth it. Now those cult goons wouldn't even let the hero party breathe, so they rushed in and started attacking them. Lillian barked an order, "Grab those humans and bring them in alive, no killing." The human fired back that they didn't just stumble in here, they conquered this dungeon already, so they weren't about to fold that easily. Then Mythia obliterated one of them in a blink, and their confidence instantly crumbled. And the rest of them, they were just brutally stronger than those cult creeps, and it left some of them getting snatched up on the spot. The cult leader stared in disbelief as the enemy crushed through. Nothing he did could stop it. And he tore into a backup plan, yanking the Disaster Dragon back to life, only it came back in a half-finished, broken state. Lillian sobs and tries to stop him, but that cult bastard barges through anyway, forcing the Disaster's revival and shutting her out mid. He's even willing to face a dragon no matter if it could mean losing his life. Suddenly, the entire place lurched and shook like it was about to tear apart. Dark mana surged around the disaster dragon's body like a storm, climbing fast and furious. In the next instant, the ground started shaking under their feet, rattling the whole area. As the cult bastard finally managed to wake the disaster dragon, everything went from bad to catastrophic. Then the dragon snapped its terrifying eyes wide open, and blasted a dragon's breath so brutal it punched a hole straight through the entire mountain. Isua and the others suddenly felt like they'd been yanked out of the cave and into the open air. Because in seconds flat, that dragon's breath blasted the ceiling to pieces. After seeing what Disaster Dragon could do, terror hit them hard, because if one breath from that beast can wipe out whole territories and countries, then what hope do they even have? It has to be an S-ranked monster, like the kind that would make the whole battlefield shake. The cult guy trembled like crazy when real calamity slammed down on him. As the Disaster Dragon finally roared awake and blasted out a terrifying gust that snapped everyone to attention, totally blindsided, and they were still reeling from how easily that dragon tore the entire ceiling out of the cave. It looked like the next breath attack was about to slam in. The Calamity Dragon's right arm suddenly snapped off and dropped away, as it screamed forward, charging up, then blasting out Dragon Breath, which got fired off practically right where Ishua and the others were standing. That dragon's breath was so brutal, it obliterated half a mountain dozens of kilometers away. Diana just stood there, wide-eyed and frozen, as the destruction unfolded right in front of her. And somehow, they lived because that dragon stumbled hard when its balance went, since its body wasn't finished yet. Lillian got the order to isolate those cult creeps and keep them along with the dragon away from the rest of the group. She wrapped them in a living fantasy world, and everything around them burst to life, dragging only the Calamity Dragon and the rest of the party through with him. Diana never once dreamed she'd live long enough to finally face the Calamity Dragon from Legends. Now they couldn't afford to hold back at all one wrong move, and it was over for them. Lillian supercharged Diana's sword, blasting it with raw power. She spun in and snapped a flawless diagonal strike straight across the dragon's body. Riduru unleashed her deadliest lightning spell right after that. He slammed into the Calamity Dragon and nailed it with a perfect, deadly strike. Mythia tore into battle and unleashed her deadliest technique, the magic sword strike Grim Lancer, and now they're sitting there like, did we actually hit anything or did we just waste our shot? That thing, and then, once the dust finally cleared, Diana's jaw dropped in pure shock. She stared in disbelief because the dragon wasn't even scratched, not one bit, and that meant this thing was way beyond their level. Diana shoved herself in front of everyone, blocking the dragon's claw like it was destiny, and when the monster finally cracked the fantasy world's surface just a little, Lillian's eyes went wide, because she'd never seen the world split like that before. Which proves just how brutally powerful that dragon was when Ishua told everyone that even a scratch from that kind of attack, if they went in, it would mean instant death for them. Because every strike they threw just bounced off with 0 damage, and Lillian had to scramble for a way to finally take down that monster. Then Saint Arya ripped through with her ultimate attack Holy Nova straight at the dragon. And somehow, against all odds, she drove straight through and punched a hole in the Calamity Dragon's side. They were thrilled because the moment they got it, it worked even against that calamity, and they figured out the reason right away. Saint's light magic was the exact opposite of the dark monofield dragon. But Arya snapped, "Look, it's regenerating already." Diana's question only tangled everything. More, she pushed Ishua to try purifying the dark mana again, just like he did earlier. He shot back. No way that dragon got drenched in dark mana, and that amount makes it impossible. And knowing it can end them in an instant means they never get the chance to even creep near it or try anything reckless. And everyone sat there thinking, that's it, we're done, we've got 0 hope left. But Ishua didn't buy it. He said, if the dragon's fully healed, then maybe, still, if Arya's hits are really landing, then they might pull it off somehow. Ishu looked around and told everyone, I've got a plan. But he knew it was insanely risky, so he had to earn their total trust. No doubts, no hesitations. They nodded to the plan even before he fully laid it out, because everyone trusted Ishua and the whole party's fate basically revolved around him. So they won't hesitate a second because they're betting their lives on this issue. Ishu, hearing them say that, lit a fire under Ishua, and he vowed to give it everything he had. Then he dared everyone to unleash their deadliest magic attacks on him. It hit everyone out of nowhere and totally caught us off guard. After he laid out every detail of the plan, they pulled the dragon's attention away. Everyone was totally in on the plan, and Diana and Lillian had to keep the dragon's focus just a little longer. Meanwhile, Arya leaned in and demanded, "Are you really sure you can?" Once he confirmed it, Arya launched Holy Nova, Ritoru tore in with Thunder Magic, and Mythia swung Grimlancer, then all 3 blasted straight at the problem. Isua was terrified, because any one of those 3 attacks could end his life in a single hit. But he had to pull it off. His plan was to twist the very attribute of his attacks. He'd never done it before, yet he was certain it could be done. Dunriteru, the sage, knows it's possible, but even when you pull off the spell's attribute change, the conversion rate is painfully low. People were stunned when he recently claimed he'd found a way to keep the conversion rate at 100, and everyone knew it just didn't work like that. But Aishwa cooked up his own method, flipping everyone's magic into holy magic so they could slam a way stronger, way deadlier hit on the Calamity Dragon. So they realized if they didn't drop the dragon with one single instant strike, the whole plan could blow up in their faces. Ishua warned them, "If I bite the dust, fall back for now and wait for the king's army to roll in." But Arya exploded that there was no way she'd let him even think about stuff like that. And then she demanded, with pure panic in her voice, that he absolutely not die. If she ever found out something happened to him, her heart would shatter into a million pieces. Right now, Ishua dug in and readied himself to unleash the Holy Nova as his launching point. So he'd have to seize control first, then cast a spell to analyze Arya's Holy Nova. And because he knew her moves inside out, he clocked her attack the instant it hit and seized control immediately. Next up, Ritteru unleashes his thunder attack. Next, Ishua wasn't really used to her lightning spell yet, so it took him a few seconds longer than Holy Nova. Ritteru stared in disbelief as he somehow twisted her lightning spell into a holy attribute. And now, there it was, one last problem waiting for him. Mythia unleashes a cursed sword attack that turns the battlefield into a nightmare. He's been tending her sword for ages, but he's never really picked it apart and studied it until now. Now he's got to lock in completely if he wants to control it. As he processed it, he realized he might not make it there in time. Everyone else caught him just standing there, frozen in place, while the moment screamed. Right up until the attacks finally caught up to him while everyone was still worried about Ishua, he realized he had no choice but to slam down a mana field, slow those strikes, and steal himself a few precious seconds. Even for that split second, he snapped into action and unleashed another wild spell to save his own life. While they thought Ishua was getting jumped by Grimlancer, Arya burst out, yelling his name in pure panic. But when the dust finally settled, he'd cracked the Grimlancer's moves too. So yeah, somehow he fused all three attacks together and nailed them into one blazing magic sphere. Ishua steadied the magic orb, and Ritteru snapped into realization he'd thrown up the mana field in the nick of time. Ishua told them Monofield could bend the rules of space-time too, then blew their minds by saying he could carve out a subspace where time crawls to a slow-motion stop. Arya said the final mage who could bend time vanished centuries ago. And now Ishua had one move left. He had to hurl his magic attack and end it. Right then, the Calamity Dragon clocked the magic sphere in his hand and spun around to attack because it could sense he was cooking up something deadly. They had to pull the dragon's focus off Ishua, so Mythia lunged in from the side and drove her sword into it, trying to steal its attention. As Diana struck for the leg, her blows just bounced right off. They were doomed, because no matter how they fought, their attack still couldn't land a single shred of damage. Right then, Arya blasted out Holy Nova and slammed it straight into the dragon's left wing. Arya somehow managed to yank the Calamity Dragon's attention straight to her. She ordered him to do it right now, because the second she decides, she's launching the boosted Holy Nova straight at that dragon. The dragon roared right back, then blasted a scorching dragon breath to slam down his attack. Ritteru snapped that this was getting disastrous because if they kept going like this, their attack would get wiped out. If Shua was damned, all their hard work would go up in smoke. He tried to waste it, but then boom, he was just messing around, using his control over that magic like a joke with perfect timing. And with that, she enchanted St. Diana's sword, then brought it down in a savage swing, the blade roaring with holy power. And it all traced back to the exact same plan they cooked up where Ishua would unleash the boosted Holy Nova. And the moment the dragon spots them, he'd blast Diana's sword with magic, and Diana would slam in the finishing blow. Diana clenched herself for the final clash, ready to crash in and land the finishing strike. And right down the middle, she cleaved the Calamity Dragon into two brutal halves. A massive explosion ripped through the area, shaking everything in its path. And there it was, the Holy Dragon finally crumpled and all the girls erupted in pure, unstoppable joy over their victory. I can't exactly celebrate yet, not when everything's still a mess. Now he's got to scramble for a way to dodge that incoming dragon's wrath before it hits him. The second they clocked him, every single person started panicking. He missed one key thing. He should have checked his defense too, because in that flawless plan to take down the dragon, one slip could get him killed. He freaked out, started brainstorming every way he could survive, and then bam, he dredged up a distant memory. Right in class, the teacher snapped into a serious tone and said there were tons of things out of the norm for humans. Teleportation magic. Yeah, the kind that just rips reality open and flings you somewhere else. Back then, Ishua was 100, certain she was right, and she didn't think anyone else could pull it off. Now that he finally mastered magic control, he couldn't resist, so he tried it on the spot and blasted a massive mana field around himself. The air in this field felt way heavier than anything he'd ever thrown before. And in here, the odds skyrocketed that he could actually bend space itself. At last, he cracked open a rift in space and hurled himself straight into it. Then Ishua stumbled straight into a space-time rift, and the universe yanked him through like a trapdoor, inside which the entire world felt untouchable, like disaster couldn't even find it. And if he got turned around here, he'd be doomed to never find his way back to his original world. He really put his mind to it, and one thought slammed into him. He had to go back, and only Arya felt right. He refused to stop until he got to her, and that fierce need pushed him straight to the exit he'd been hunting for. While Ishua is trapped inside, everyone outside panicked because the dragon's scorching breath somehow blasted right through where he stood. Lillian screamed his name and tore through the crowd searching, but he was gone, leaving not a single trace behind. Lillian started crying, convinced they'd lost him then, the very next moment. Right out of nowhere, he throws a fell upon Arya behind him, snapping the moment in half. Ishua had a pounding headache for a moment, then he spotted Arya, and relief hit him hard as he realized she was okay. He told her he'd used her as a marker to find his way in this world. But she didn't care. She yanked him into a hug because she was terrified out of her mind. Meanwhile, Lillian stared in disbelief, thinking, how in the world did he survive that? Because that dragon's breath didn't just burn the area, it absolutely wiped it out. Rituru snapped that only teleportation could possibly work here, and if you buy into modern magic theory, teleporting and even getting a time slip should be totally within reach. After Ishua tried teleporting right there and felt it click, he realized space and time weren't anything new at all. They were the very same thing, just spoken differently. Rituru snapped back that humanity wasn't ready to hear that kind of truth yet. And even when the theory proved true, only someone with Ishua's insane magical power could pull it off. Mithio shot them a look and told them to drop all the complicated talk for now, and told them to remember the real truth. They battled that legendary Calamity Dragon and actually crushed it, winning for real. Lillian barked that they had to get back to the castle, and just a few days later, it all caught up with them. They rolled into the royal capital and rushed straight to the king, spilling every detail of what happened. The king's jaw hit the floor when he learned they crushed the Calamity Dragon using only Lillian and Ishu as their whole party. The king said, even in the oldest tales, only 100 gathered heroes ever managed to pull off the feat of sealing the dragon. They killed the dragon, and the shock of thinking that was the end was unreal. Then Ishua said it wasn't fully resurrected yet. But the king shrugged and said it doesn't matter because they wiped out that massive threat from the land for good. At that exact moment, the prime minister stepped up and demanded they raise a statue of Ishua along with the others in the middle of the plaza. The king didn't just announce it, he demanded preparations start immediately, then declared, "Today we celebrate." Then Ishua leaned in and told everyone he had to ask the king one urgent question. The king grinned and asked him, bursting with excitement, "So what is it?" Ishua blurted that Ishua was supposed to be here by now, so where was he? And the king and prime minister's faces went tight with dread, and he had zero good news to offer about it. Now they're all spiraling, worrying Ishua and the party sick over what might have happened. Then the king barked at a soldier to hand the report over to the officer. Right after Ishua got the report, his eyes widened. Alan was officially off the map and wanted by everyone. He leaned in and demanded the king explain what all of this was supposed to mean. And the king laid out the whole shocking tale for him. Then Ishua took off straight for the spot where it all went down. And he's still reeling just a stone's throw from the royal capital. A full-on stampede of monsters exploded out of nowhere. The soldier confirmed it, those reports were real, and then he added that he was one of the men hauling Alan in for transport. While they were hauling him in transit, Alan kept pushing them again and again to let him go, set it up like he'd died, then slip away unnoticed because if everyone found out a former hero had teamed up with the criminal guild, the other hero's reputation would crash too, and nobody would be safe. But the soldier, James, didn't even dare to think about freeing Alan. Right then, someone snapped to the captain there was something lurking on the road ahead. James stared ahead and spotted more figures barreling toward them. And when he finally stared them down, his stomach dropped, because they weren't people at all. They were a roaring horde of monsters charging straight at them. He barked an order for one of their men to sprint to the city behind them and report exactly what was happening here, while he and the rest of them would slam the brakes on the monsters here. Alan couldn't believe it. How in the world could a monster outbreak hit the exact moment he's getting carried off after his arrest? His luck really, truly sucks. Until it hit him, this was his shot to break free. He yanked out his phone and called James, demanding, "Untie me, I'm gonna fight those monsters too." But James only got more suspicious, convinced Alan was really trying to slip out so. But Alan swore he was still a hero at heart, and he refused to let his life end in a dump like this. James didn't want any part of it until Alan kept pressing him again and again and finally wore him down. And James resigned himself to it. thinking, yeah, there's nothing I can do about this now. He yanked the shackles off Alan, roared at everyone to stay on guard, and warned that monsters better not come for the carrot. But Alan's smirk turned dangerous now that he was finally free. James snapped around and barked at Alan to take the left. James was suddenly ambushed and slammed into a brutal attack. Alan blindsides him out of nowhere, and the second he's down, he flees while snarling that the soldier is a total fool. Alan snatched the mana potions and bolted, leaving those soldiers to get wiped out by the monster horde. Record Ishua recoiled at what Alan had done, and James couldn't shake the guilt of ever believing him in the first place. Arya finally saw what turned Alan into a wanted man, and the fact he used to be a hero makes it all feel damn pathetic. Then James dropped a bombshell right after Alan ran. The monsters suddenly stopped in their tracks, backed away, and vanished like they'd lost the will to fight. Diana figured it was nothing more than a repeat of the stampede that tore through the elf village. Villain watched as every monster abruptly froze, then backed away like they'd rehearsed it, and she couldn't shake the feeling that their moves then and now were perfectly coordinated. Then a soldier dragged in someone who saw everything that happened here. Ishua grabbed a villager by the moment and demanded to know what really happened here that day. He shot back that as soon as he showed up, a whole swarm of monsters tore into the area around the same time, and right in the middle of them stood this eerie mother, a stunning woman, except her body was see-through like liquid water. Saint Arya was convinced it had to be one of the 4 heavenly demon undying. And if it was her, it totally explains why the monsters moved like they were in sync, because she could command them. It feels like Undine picked Alan on purpose to save him, but that only raises the real question, why would she spare the hero at all? Once they stared into it deeper, every thought spiraled into a mess, and Alan's trail would have been nearly impossible to trace from there. For now, he told them, let's head to Nabish and crash there for the rest. Several days later at the Nabish Guild, the tension had only grown. All across the guild, every last member piled into the celebration to welcome the issue with open arms. And he had no clue how things had spiraled so far for them to end up like this. Every single one of them watched as Ishuo smashed the legendary Calamity Dragon, and the news hit like thunder. Hearing that, the Adventurer Guild swung into action and decided to promote, to boost Ishua and Arya up to a higher rank. Ishua shrugs at the ranking like it doesn't add up, since they barely took any quests yet. She insists the quest still showed up right when things turned deadly. And the crazy part is that Ishua and the others were already out there doing it. She also shot Mithya and Riteru up the ranks. Ishua can't even process it. How are they already at this rank when they know exactly how brutal it was to claw their way here? Diana burst in and praised Ishua and Arya for climbing all the way up to rank A. And when they demand that figure, they'll have to show up like the ranks depend on it. No one wants to bring shame, but Mithya already knows he'll grab those leftover quests again, starting tomorrow. Lillian then blurted to everyone that today was party day. And the moment party hit the air, Ishua and Diana's ears shot up, then they warned Arya and Lillian not to drink. Drink then, out of nowhere, an emergency message blasted in from the capital at night. And he came crashing in to tell them an emergency quest had just been unleashed. Everyone jolted when that sudden emergency quest blasted out like a warning siren. And lately, the adventurers have been on edge because the emergency quests have been stacking up nonstop. They're begging for a breather because right after the Calamity Dragon gets revived and then wiped out, they've barely caught their breath. Then an adventurer tore into the emergency quest message and read it word for word. To rally and defend the Pendulum Fortress as a monstrous invasion crashes down. Lillian remembered that the fortress in the north wasn't just there. It stood as the key shield against the demon realm. They can't let that strategic base fall no way. And if they're still begging for help with hundreds of soldiers on hand, you know, the invasion is absolutely brutal. Lately, there's even been word of monsters moving like they're working together, hitting in perfect sync. Recently, the adventurers panicked if the monsters kept multiplying like this, Pendulum Fortress would crack, and they'd have to walk double the firepower just to get the quest done. Lillian figured the Demon Lord's scheme had to be happening any second now, because the monsters were moving like something big was about to hit. If that's how it's going down, then the plan is obvious. Lillian, in charge, already decided they'd take the quest. When everyone saw Ishua and his crew grab that quest, even though peril kept crashing into them again and again, they couldn't believe it. Recently, they were buzzing to jump on that quest, convinced everything would work out as long as Hero Lillian's party showed up. There, Ishua and Lillian were stunned that simply standing there could light a fire in everyone around them, and Diana couldn't believe it as she remarked, she could swear the world would be saved for real by Ishua and Lillian, no doubt. Alright, several days later, right when everyone showed up at the Pendulum Fortune Gathering place, the knights welcomed every adventurer here, begging them to step in and help. He stepped in to help, then introduced himself as Lime, calling himself a rep for all the adventurers, and said he couldn't wait to team up with the knights. Lime figured Ishua thought he was the commander, then he quickly corrected him only to have an old man's voice thunder through the air, barking at everyone to line up. They can't afford to ease up for a second. They've got to stay sharp and follow the rules. No sloppy, untrained behavior allowed. Lime blurted out that this old knight in front of us, Anaya, was the commander of the Central Knights.